You know the way everybody's into weirdness right now?
CirclemakersTV. I hope you can hear us and see us. We're never sure about these things until you tell us, but if you are seeing us and hearing us, thanks for tuning in, and this is the place where you will learn things and change your ideas, and that's not a bad thing, although it might feel that way. Usually does for most people. We like to think that oh, somebody says I'm too low. There we go. How's about that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm a bit louder now. I don't want to clip it though, because you know what we're like. We clip the audio every week, so I've got to stop doing that. Well, yes. If you have your belief systems reordered and rearranged, this is a good thing. But as they say in these teaching courses, with change comes usually anger, then depression, then acceptance, and then you move on. And that's what we're on. We're moving on. A bit like Egypt, really. And we've got somebody today with us in the hot seat who's interested in Egypt as well. So let's go across to the hot seat right now. And, oh no, well, that's not going to work. So, yes, let's go across to the hot seat and press this button. And who transpires? Andrew Collins. Hello, sir.
Good evening to you.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Apart from the cold.
I'm suffering, but I'm good.
Right. Okay. Well, we're very glad to have you here. And he's being very modest. He's had a stinking cold, and he's actually come out of the house specially for us. So I feel honoured that somebody would actually make the effort to do these things. You know. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
Right. Well. Sounds like a spin dryer in the background, I'm being told. The sound is very low. Okay, the sound is very low. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Andy.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
How's that then? Right, okay, we'll turn you all up. We're just about to start. This is how it goes at the beginning of every show, but we'll get there in the end. Yes, right. So... there we are. They're saying it's good now. This is what we do. Right. Andy, can I ask you a little bit about your background?
Yes, I think I've probably been investigating every aspect of the paranormal probably for the last 30 to 35 years. And that covers everything from UFOs to psychic phenomena to the occult to mysticism, crop circles, pseudoscience right the way through to quantum physics and history in general.
Oh, right. And so how long have you known Busty Taylor then, and how did your book with him come about?
I think you might be referring to my antithesis, Colin Andrews, there actually.
You're not Colin. Oh, Colin oh shit. This is Andrew Collins. Yes, it's Andrew Collins, I know. Sorry, I had to play that little joke. But apparently, I understand that a lot of people make this mistake.
A lot of people.
We were chatting about this earlier on. What do people do then?
Well, they certainly send me a lot of emails addressed to Colin Andrews.
Oh, right.
And I think just a lot of people just generally get quite confused. But obviously I was put on this earth to become Colin Andrews' worst nightmare, and maybe
Really?
I have been once in a while.
Oh dear, right. But you're certainly put on this earth to be Colin Andrews' forwarding service by the sounds of it, yes, and vice versa. Does he get the same problem? Does he pass you emails back?
I would think so.
Yes, yeah, okay, great. Well, the world is big enough for two paranormal researchers, I'm sure, with names that actually go back to front and back to front. Yes. So, interest in this stuff goes back a long way into childhood?
Certainly. I mean, UFOs is something which I was interested in probably from the early teens, and I started to look into material relating to them then. But what I found is that nobody else was particularly interested in it, other than one other mate at school. But then it really got left until my late teens, when I started work in London, and I really started gorging mass paperbacks on UFOs by the dozen load. And probably within a couple of years, I probably read about 100. And I just wanted to get closer to the phenomena itself. I basically wanted to try and contact it, I suppose is the best way of looking at it. So I became a UFO investigator. I thought that would bring me closer, because obviously I'd start to interview people that had actually seen these things. At that time I was quite happy to believe that everything was the product of space aliens coming from another planet. But it didn't take me very long to start to realise that the actual answer was an awful lot more complex than that, and that we might even be looking for completely alternative solutions.
Great. Oh, well, yes, as a young person asking for things to be seen and heard, did you actually get anything? I mean, I remember reading books about the paranormal when I was quite young, and thinking, what's all this about? What's it all about? What did you actually do, and did you have any results? I
did, yeah. I mean, from an early point, I became conscious of the fact that there was a psychic element involved, that people with psychic abilities seem to be experiencing what you might call genuine UFO sightings more frequently than those that had absolutely no apparent psychic capabilities. And this struck me as odd, which either meant that the psychics were just liars and they were making it up, or there was something about the phenomena that was attracted to them, or, of course, vice versa, that they were attracting the phenomena towards themselves. So I started to home in on psychics and those that had psychic talents. And within a short period of time, I began to realise that they were probably the key. I also realised that there were physiological and psychological traits in common with these individuals that could almost allow you to predict what type of person would be most susceptible to not just UFO sightings, but also everything from astral projection to poltergeist, to witnessing a ghost, to having the ability of psychometry, the ability of touching an object and knowing something about it, or even feeling presences when they go into an old building. This seemed to be a talent that was related to more, I would say, the genetic backgrounds of the people. And it was at this point that I started to investigate even more interesting cases, those involving actual contact with UFO entities. The most important of these was the so-called Averley abduction in Essex. A whole family of 5, a mother, father and their 3 young children, are going along the quiet lanes of West Essex one night in 1974, and they see a strange oval blue light crossing in the sky, and then the car headlights go out, the engine cuts, and they career into this luminous bank of green mist that stretches across the road.
Right.
At which point it all goes a bit wobbly, and they find themselves further along the same road, and they get home and realise that 3 hours are missing from their lives. And this was not just one of the first so-called abduction cases ever reported in Britain, but it was my introduction to the subject. Up to this point, it was something that was relatively unknown in this country. This was back in 1977, although the actual incident occurred in 74. And the more I spent time with this family, the more I began to change as a person. And hypnosis was used to start with. This allowed some kind of on-board experience to be recalled by the parents. But I'm
just wondering, sorry, what sort of age, you said 1970, what age were you when you were doing these investigations?
I was at that point 19.
Yeah, okay, that's just good to know.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so I was a young, very green UFO investigator, really, but I was also a punk. And when I wasn't interviewing UFO witnesses, I was right up the front stage of the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Damned, bands like that.
Excellent.
So
yes,
that half of my life was sort of anarchy and cities rule and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And then there was the other part of me pulling towards some kind of metaphysical reality. And it was at this point, which was late 1977, early 78, that things really changed for me.
Right.
And I started to realise there was such things as countryside and trees and prehistoric sites and stone circles and whatever. Everything changed for me, and I don't think that this was a pure coincidence to be getting involved with these type of people.
You were drawn into it, but I cut you off a little bit. Then you were starting to say about the case with the people and hypnosis was used. And
well, the thing is that
what was the sort of upshot of it all?
The upshot of it was that beyond the hypnosis, we started to use the same techniques and found that some kind of exterior personality would come through both the male and the female of the whole household, John and Sue Day, claiming to be the actual abductors involved with their case. They referred to themselves under the name the Watchers, and a lot of information was imparted in this way. Plus, John felt that he could communicate with this intelligence through dreams, through intuition, and just a sort of knowing. And again, at that time, we saw it in terms of, pure nuts and bolts spacecraft, aliens and whatever. But I think that even for them, at this point, they realised that this was almost inadequate to truly explain what was going on, and that the more you looked into the actual details of their case, the more you began to realise that something even more interesting was going on here. Right.
Well, it sounds like you had a good grounding at an early age in all this sort of stuff. And can we ask sort of roughly how old you are now?
Roughly how old I am?
Roughly.
Well, roughly I'm about 54 years and 1 month.
That's too rough for me. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, it's obviously, you've had a sort of a massive period of research then. You've got about 30 years under your belt, haven't you, really? That's pretty good going. And I mean, obviously we're Circlemakers TV, we're looking into the circle maker aspects, but you've got a lot to say on a lot of different subjects. I mean, you've written so many books on Egyptology and other areas. I'm sure that we're going to get questions coming in tonight from people who are wanting to go into those areas.
Okay. And
what we say is that we're quite happy to maybe ask you one or two questions, but we're not going to really concentrate on that tonight, because it's going to be about circle making, and we're going to sort of try and focus it on whether or not the circle makers are doing these things, and see what Mr. Collins, Andy Collins' opinion is. Mr. Collins, you see, I'm sort of like, ooh, I'm in awe of him. He's an author. He's had things published. Oh my God, Mr. Collins, Andy to you.
Well, it's not a problem. When I go abroad, they call me Professor Collins.
Do they? Right.
Even though I have absolutely no credentials whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll try and keep it on circles, basically. I think that's the thing of tonight's show. But Andy has actually... Do you mind me calling you Andy?
Call me what you like.
And Andy's actually said...
Colin, even.
Oh, Colin.
Yes. I think that would just confuse your listeners, viewers.
We ain't going to call you this guy, though. He's become deflated. For all the Jesus fans out there, something happened to him after he was touched by last week's guest. He's started losing gas. So if anybody can help with that, we'd appreciate it. But what we're going to say now is we're going to do the formalities, because we haven't told people that you can actually Skype into the show, and you can do that by Skyping CirclemakersTV, adding us as a contact. CirclemakersTV is the name, or you can actually type in your questions into the live stream chat window. Now, I don't know whether you need to log in or not to do this, give yourself an account, but if you look down and you scroll down your window, you'll actually see that there's a little chat room, and people are tapping away, and that's real time. And if you want to ask a question, tap it in there, and if we can, we'll put it to Andy. And if we haven't asked it, repeat the question and say, sort of like, I really want this asked, because sometimes we will miss things because there's lots of conversations going on. But we've got a website called www.circlemakerstv.org, which I'm sure you're all familiar with now. That will contain details of upcoming shows and how to get in touch with us. But also, Mr. Collins has a website of his own, so I'll let him tell you about that. What's your website, Andy?
AndrewCollins.com.
www.andrewcollins.com. That's quite simple. And it's Collins is 2 L's for anybody that can't spell properly. Collins. Okay, so that's Andy's site, and you should get over there and, of course, buy everything he has ever made and make him humongously rich. That's not something that Circle Makers managed to ever have achieved, but make this man rich. He has written a book, as we've heard, called The New Circle Makers. So I think we'll come a little bit on to your original research, and we'll have a chat about that. So what brought you into crop circles then?
Well, it was the same period that I was talking about, just 77, 78, that I was called to a UFO case in Hertfordshire, and I was told that there were some physical traces left behind by an object that some kids had seen rising up from a field. And I got there, and there was some evidence of a circular patches within a wheat field. Well, it was wheat. I think it was barley, actually. And I wasn't that convinced, in all honesty. I thought it might be something to do with the fact that there was rubbish beneath the soil and that particular plant hadn't grown correctly. It wasn't that convincing. And I put this in the actual case report. And I think that was probably it. I didn't visit any further crop circles or take any real interest in them other than reading about them in UFO books until the end of the 1970s, when I read the work of Ian Misriglod, who was one of the pioneers of the crop circle research world, and he started looking at them that were appearing in the area of Westbury, near Warminster. Warminster having been the old crop circle mecca,
yes,
UFO mecca during the 60s and 70s. And I sort of followed that research and saw the fact that the pattern seemed to be developing, evolving from single circles to groups of 4, groups of 5, with rings around it occasionally, sometimes spurs. And it wasn't until 1990 that I first gazed upon a picture of the great crop formation that appeared in Eastfield Alton Barnes, that I realised that either something incredible was going on here, that some true contact was being made, or that that there was hoaxing on an incredible level going on here, or perhaps even both.
Right.
And that really drew me into it, although it was too late to get take any active role that year. But the following year, 1991, I got the group that I was working with at the time, a group called EarthQuest in Essex, to accompany me down to the fields of Wiltshire. And I remember coming into Wiltshire, not really knowing where to go, and ringing up this telephone number that I was given, and it was actually Busty Taylor's telephone number, and saying,
yes.
you know, where are the crop circles? And he said, well, you're going to want to see one. Oh God, I forgot where it is. I'll come back to it. But basically, it was him that that Barbary Castle. It was a famous Barbary Castle, the huge triangular formation.
Oh yes,
And
I know
that was the
all about
first
that one.
crop formation that that I ever went into.
Ah, right.
Now, at that time, I was quite happy to accept that these were of some kind of paranormal nature, and was for years, until obviously Doug and Dave came along, and you know, people had to sit up and take notice of the fact that even if they weren't making the classics in Wiltshire, they certainly were creating them in Hampshire, and in some parts of Wiltshire. In fact, there was a possibility that they may have even created the original ones investigated by Ian Misriglod at Westbury. And you had to take this on board. Now, as all this was taking place, which was actually towards the end of 1981, I was writing a book which became The Circlemakers, which was published in 1992. And a complete rewrite of that came out as The New Circlemakers in 2008, although the two books are almost entirely different.
Yeah.
And I think that it was probably by 1995, which is when I left the crop circle scene for the first, I'll say for the first time, the only time really, that I think I'd probably concluded that up to that point, up to then, that, you know, that the large majority of these were being manufactured by humans. By that time, I knew various of the people that were making them, and it seemed an obvious leap that the rest of them, or at least 99% of them, were being created by humans. But I still held a flame up for a few of them, and because Barbary Castle was the first one that I'd ever been into, I like to think that that one could have been genuine.
Yes.
Now I don't consider that's the case at all. Well,
okay, we'll come on to that later, but yes, yeah.
But anyway, and my opinion now, and this is not just my own opinion, but it's based on the fact that that I've lived in this area, in the Marlborough area, for the last 4 years, having come down from Essex, and also got to know a lot more people locally, not just circle makers, but also farmers, and that people that come in contact with everybody associated with the crop circle scene year in, year out, season after season, that I would now say that 100% of crop circles, crop formations, geoglyphs, whatever you want to call them, that are being constructed today are of human manufacture.
And on that note, I think we have to press this button, which makes this strange sound. It's called Dramatic Chipmunk. Dramatic Chipmunk comes when people say something very, very dramatic, which is 100% of crop circles are man-made. Well, well, well. You heard it here first, folks. This man is obviously very confident. I've always played this line of saying that, you know, maybe there's some out there that we just don't know who the makers are, and we sometimes meet them a couple of years later and find out who they are. But, you know, it's always the simple circles, I think, that kind of give me the mystery, because, you know, why would anybody bother making such a simple, pathetic circle? That's the ones I kind of, you know, you just don't know who makes them. Maybe they're the original phenomena. What do you think about that?
Well, I say 100%. Let's call it 99.99%.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because I'm quite happy to accept that there are such things as saucer nests, traces left behind by what we would call UFOs, and as to their nature, that's something we can talk about separately. And that these have been appearing, you know, around the world since long before the modern crop circle era. But beyond that, I've spoken to various people that have seen proper crop circles before the modern era. I mean, for instance, a councillor in Southend in Essex that I knew during the Second World War, she was evacuated to the Cotswolds, as obviously many other children were to other parts of the country during the Blitz. So she suddenly found herself within a farming community, and they would go into the fields and they would actually see occasionally perfectly formed what we call crop circles, and these would actually be referred to as devil circles, and it would actually be considered bad luck, or you know, that some kind of ill omen would befall you if you actually walked inside them. So the actual children who knew this would actually avoid them. But I mean, this woman is a very intelligent, intellectual person who
very straightforward.
who is not going to have made this up. You know, she's not going to have seen wind damage or something like that.
Yes.
And she was quite certain that these were the same as the crop circles that you see today. And the thing is, then you've got to say to yourself, well, is there a natural phenomena? And I think the answer is yes, there is a natural phenomena. However, this only goes so far. We're dealing with simple circles that may actually look more like a bomb blast than actually a swirled patterns. And that once in a while, these may have extensions on them. They might have rings around them. This has been reported in Australia and New Zealand. They might have a spur or something like that coming from them.
Yeah.
Again, this has been reported, you know, in far-flung parts of the world. However, this is obviously different from the incredible and very beautiful designs that are appearing in our field today, which, although man-made, I want to state quite clearly, are still a mystery and enigma of our times, and we need to accept that and need to work with them, and we need to see them as inspired, even if made by human hands. And as to why that is, we'll come on to shortly, I'm sure.
Oh yes, we've got plenty of time for that. We likes that. Circlemakers TV likes talks of the paranormal in crop circles because we knows it because we're the circle makers. And we've been doing it, and we've been having strange experiences like you've been having strange experiences. Ooh, are. So, yes, it's a very emotive subject, though, isn't it, crop circles, for some people? And, you know, coming from your background, where you used to believe in these things, and now you're sort of thinking that it's man-made, was that something that you... Let's just take you as an example. Were you offended when you found out that people were making circles?
Yes. I think that the biggest deflation really was the whole Doug and Dave revelations in September 1991. I can recall it very, very vividly.
Right.
I'd attended a crop circle conference in Glastonbury, and it had ended on a high on the Sunday, and I remember talking with some people that I knew actually made crop formations at the time, one of which was Rob Irving and Adrian, who was it, who had been...
Adrian Dexter.
Adrian Dexter. I remember I was talking with them.
It's an old name. We don't hear that name
in
much.
The bar of the Georgian Pilgrim in Glastonbury. And they alluded to me that something was in the air. They weren't even quite sure what it was themselves, although I think they knew more than what they were actually saying. And suddenly this sort of rumour, this buzz went round the remaining people who were still there from the conference, that something was about to happen, and that we should watch the papers the next day. And of course, the Today newspaper, which is obviously no longer printed, had a huge expose story about crop circles, saying that, you know, essentially they were man-made because these two guys, Doug and Dave, sexagenarians, had come out and said that they were making them. And of course, obviously, you look at those two guys, a couple of jokers, you know, making them on a Friday night after they come out of a pub, and you think, how could guys like this have been creating these things, these incredible geometric structures with so much symbolism involved? And the answer is that they weren't making those, they were making more simple ones, but it still made you realise at that point that, well, if they're making this and they've been doing this for so many years and have got away with it, clearly there is a very good chance that most of the other ones. And I remember coming from that conference on the Monday back through the area of Avebury and Silbury Hill and going to the remains of a crop formation that had appeared at East Kennet, and standing within it and gazing out from there towards Silbury Hill and just thinking, you know, is that the end? I mean, I just remember that. And the strange thing is that image burnt so strongly into my mind that I actually ended up creating that image for the front cover of the Circlemakers, which is why on the original Circlemakers, that's what you see. You see the key at the end of the East Kennet formation looking out towards Silbury Hill, but you see above Silbury Hill this sort of great plasma-like light sort of beaming this energy down onto the top of it, with this little device on the top, which is actually a cloudbuster of Wilhelm Reich fame, which, you know, he created to sort of to change the weather and supposedly also to make UFOs blink out in the sky. A very weird story. And a lot of this was the emphasis of my book, not really the crop circles themselves, because what I was trying to get across is that there was some kind of strange energy involved with crop circles that were producing all the weird effects that people were having in them, physiological, psychological, all the technical failures, all the electrical faults with instrumentation, plus all the lights, all the rest of it seemed to be associated with some kind of unknown energy. And I stick to that to this day. And I've refined those ideas, and the key word today is plasma, almost certainly. But this doesn't mean that the formations themselves were made by plasma or orgone energy, which was the name that Wilhelm Reich gave to this. But I do believe that these energies are involved with the formations, and that they still play a part in all of the strangeness that goes on.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I agree with that sentiment that there seems to be some sort of energy which attaches itself to crop circles afterwards, you know, that certainly the circle makers aren't responsible for what goes in energy-wise or spiritual-wise to the crop circles.
No.
I mean, the circle makers might have spiritual intent, or they might have a wish which they want something to happen, and we'll say we hope something happens, and we try to keep this positive because we think we're interfacing with a paranormal realm. So if there's a dialogue going on, then we should sort of keep it positive. But what comes afterwards is nothing to do with human hand. You know,
No.
the strange things, the UFOs, the plasmas, the equipment failures, the electrostatics, all that sort of stuff really requires a lot of research, doesn't it?
Well, one story which I like is I was speaking to one circle maker who'd created a formation one night and went back the next day to see his handiwork. And as he walked up towards it, there was another lady, and she was asking where the new crop formation was, and he said, I'll show you. And they walked up together towards it. He obviously didn't tell her that he'd constructed it. And he got to the point of entry into the formation. He was suddenly hit by this energy. And he actually said to this woman, "Could you feel that?" And she said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he couldn't believe it because he'd actually constructed this the night before. He'd never felt it as strongly as this before. And he realised at that point that something does happen, you know, when he and obviously other circle makers create these things that changes the land itself, changes the position, whether it's the geometry of the design, you know, whether it's just the placement or the intent, whatever, that something goes on. And if that does happen, and I believe that happens, you know, in many cases of crop circle formation, creation, then what else does it do? I mean, can it affect instrumentation? Can it make people feel ill? Can it give people euphoria? You know, can it even change the actual wheat or the you know, the type of crop that's there? I think the answer is going to be yes.
Yes, very interesting. Well, would you like to know how many users we've got on at the moment? We've got about 50 users, 50 people logged in watching, and we normally get about 200 people watch the show afterwards. But tonight is a good one. We're up to the 50 sort of mark, which is good. And would you like to take a question at this early juncture? We'll make a little detour then into one of the questions. Now, Wraithy actually brought up a crop circle and said, could we show this and see what your reaction is to it? So I'm going to go back to his question to make sure I get this right now. He says, can you see this crop circle? And, you know, does Andrew recognise the Uffington Castle formation? Right, now I'll let you know, right, just so you know. Andy's too far away from the screen to see your comments. So I'll just ask him, what does that mean to you, Andy? Oh, no, just what does it mean to you?
Well, it looks like a bomb that's exploding with fire.
Okay.
Which I think is almost very close to the actual emblem of one of the British Army regiments, isn't it? Is it the Royal Fusiliers?
Royal Fusiliers, that's what it means to you. Okay, then.
But, I mean, I'm only saying that as I look at it at a distance. But the actual formation itself is man-made.
You know it to be man-made?
I think I know who did it, yes.
Okay.
No names, no patrial, as that's not permitted, simply because, you know, people's handiwork is their own. If they want to reveal, you know, if they made it, then that's fine. It's not up to me to actually say. But, you know, this is a typical example of what can be created in the fields.
Okay.
I'm not small hours of night.
Yeah, I'm not trying to catch you out or anything with this one. All I'm trying to do is sort of see if you know what Wraithy is saying. Does Andrew recognise this Uffington Castle formation? I'll fill you in on the second half of his comment. Then he says, "Does this mean anything to you, Malik Taus? Does that mean anything?" I was hoping that by showing you this picture, you would suddenly go, Malik Taus. What does Malik Taus mean?
Means,
I have no idea myself. I have no idea.
I mean, basically, it's one of the names of the so-called peacock angel that's revered by the Yazidi. That's a religion and a race of people that come from Kurdistan.
I see.
Which is obviously made up in parts of Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and Syria, and Armenia, of course. And I can see obviously what they're saying here, that this is an abstract peacock with all its feathers splayed, male peacock. Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you get that then, that's fine. Right, so going back to crop circles then, we've talked a little bit about your background, we talked about the UFOs, we talked about electrical effects and things being present in crop circles, but my problem with crop circle researchers is that they haven't taken the human aspect very seriously, and this has skewed a lot of what they're researching into areas. Sorry, I'm on the wrong picture now. I thought it was on me. But into the areas which sort of only can be explained by the paranormal. They don't look at the human aspect. What do you feel about researchers that don't look at the human aspect? Do you think there are many researchers out there like that do that?
Yes, there's some. But I would say that there are a lot more researchers out there that do accept that a great majority,
even
some 99.99% of the formations are human-made. But for whatever reason, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but for whatever reason they choose not to come out publicly and say, I believe that these are man-made. But there is changes going on.
Yes.
in the different crop circle forums going on at the moment, there is a lot of traffic of people saying, well, if these are all man-made, then why haven't you told us before? Why have you kept this back?
Good point.
And the answer is that, firstly, you wouldn't have accepted it, and B, it's not in some people's interest to actually reveal that information. It's really not. I mean, you
Yes.
know, whether it be to do with the fact that they might make money out of it, or the fact that they believe that it would affect their own standing within the subject, you know, to the fact that they might never get asked to do another lecture again in their life on that particular subject. I know certain researchers whose career was killed on stage when they revealed that they now accepted that crop formations were of human manufacture. And this is not necessary because, you know, the key word for the future is co-creation.
Yes.
And that is the fact that circle makers, would I say all? Maybe all, or certainly a large percentage of them, are inspired. Or maybe they're all inspired some of the time to actually go out and to create something that has come to them in an inspired manner, whether it be through dreams or just sitting in front of a piece of paper and creating a design that it's almost like automatic writing. They are creating this automatic writing within a virgin field, and that they are almost being used as a channel for this information to come from some kind of higher source. Just in the same way that the architect of the Great Pyramid, I would say, was inspired. And I don't think there would be anybody out there that would not say that whoever it was that designed the Great Pyramid was not inspired. But did that architect of the Great Pyramid know all of the possible geometry which we now find within that structure? I think the answer is no.
Yes.
I don't think they did. Just in the same way that a number of the circle makers are not fully aware of the absolute symbolism which they're creating in the fields. They're just not aware of it. They are aware of some of the symbolism. Of course, they try and incorporate some of that into the design. But what others find within it afterwards absolutely amazes them. I know this because I've spoken to them. I've said, did you know what you were doing when you were creating this?
Yes,
said, no.
indeed. And they don't, do they? Well, I mean, there's been many cases where circle makers have gone out and done designs. Same field, two teams have gone and done things that are similar. You know, in sort of, you could almost say, well, you know, there's a theme going on here, and it's like, are we picking these ideas up from somewhere else?
I think so. I think that circle makers are picking them up not just from some kind of external source, and I wouldn't like to pin down exactly what that is. It could even be the collective unconscious of the human race, I don't know.
Yes.
But beyond that, obviously there are various stories that the circle makers have been inspired to go out and create a design, not realising that there is a group of croppies close by trying to wish that same design to appear in that very field.
Yes.
And that has happened. And
more than one occasion, I think, yes.
And how does that work then? Well, we come on to the whole idea of quantum theory and the idea of entanglement, and that's the fact that you know, what is in one person's mind can be replicated in other people's minds or externally through the fact that particles can be connected, joined pairs, interconnected pairs, in a process that involves so-called non-locality. In other words, no local connection. I think that this is almost certainly behind concepts of paranormal, of telepathy, of everything from remote viewing or whatever, and that this is something that we should be looking into. And I think that we need to be looking at the crop formations in a lateral point of view, from a quantum perspective,
Right.
as thought experiments. You know, the fact that they appear, it doesn't matter who created them or what created them. They have a message. You have to look for that message. You know, if you spend all your time trying to say, this was created by space aliens or this was all created by humans, you'll miss the point.
Yes.
And the point is that they have messages, and those messages, but whether they be in the symbolism, the design, or numerology or whatever, are there for the taking. And I don't think it is wrong that people look at them and they do find meaning in them. I think this is why they are there. And I think this is one of the reasons why they have evolved over the last 20 years and will probably continue to evolve in some manner, shape or form. And the circle makers play a very, very valuable role in all of this, and that should never be underestimated.
Well, there you have it, folks. Interesting stuff. I mean, have you ever heard about drug-induced states creating strange symbols which have been then used in cave paintings? I saw a very interesting program on the BBC which was talking about hallucinogens, and that people in the past, shamans and hunters even, would take hallucinogens, and they would go into very deep altered states, almost like dream states, where they wouldn't you can use some stimulants to kind of to hunt with, but these were like very deep states where you'd actually not be moving around, you'd be going into a dream inside state. And some of the experiences that would be had, there were two or three levels. I think the first level would be sort of like the drug experience on top of what you're actually seeing. Then when you get to the second level, you're having your internal dreams. So you basically dream about things that you're connected with. So if you happen to live in the West, you'd be dreaming about skyscrapers and cars and roads and stuff like this. If you happen to live in Africa, you might be dreaming about gazelles and lions and deserts and things like that. So level 2 of dream state would take you to familiar places, but level 3 of dream state takes you to archetypal imagery, things that exist in the brain which aren't very well understood and certainly not talked about very much, but there are shapes and images which come up in cave paintings which they haven't been able to decipher them. Basically, what do they mean? I mean, you could see a horse, it's a horse. You can see a man, he's got a spear, he's chasing the horse. That's fairly self-explanatory, but there are some strange shapes in cave paintings which look almost like crop circles, and they look like crosses, Celtic crosses with balls on the end, things like this, and strange circular shapes. Strangely enough, those things are experienced in the dream states when you take lots of drugs. Have you heard anything about that?
I have. I talked about this in great detail in a book called the Cygnus Mystery.
Right.
Came out in 2006. Yes, there was a whole relationship between the creation of abstract symbols in the mind within deep level altered states of consciousness, whether they be drug induced, whether they be induced through dancing, through dream states, or any other method of entering a shifted reality. And it certainly isn't new, relating them to crop circles. I mean, people like Busty Taylor, George Wingfield, Colin Andrews, all these early pioneers in the field were all drawing these associations back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. But I think that what they saw is the fact that some kind of supernatural force was involved with both of them. In other words, their appearance in the fields was directly of supernatural nature. In other words, it was the same things creating both. I think, yes, it is the same thing creating both, but obviously the source here is the human mind and the unconscious states of the human mind, and these are obviously being transferred obviously in the past onto cave walls, whether they be concentric circles or other types of designs that we might recognise today. But now they're being painted, if you like, into the fields.
Yes.
And I think that this is actually quite remarkable because once again, you are definitely dealing with some kind of externalisation of the unconscious, into the agricultural fields of Britain and elsewhere around the world. And I think this is an incredible thing. Again, something that should not be undervalued. You know, just because humans make crop formations does not mean that they've got to be dismissed as hoaxes. This term hoaxes has to be got rid of. It's ridiculous. You know, I mean, yes, there might have been a few people that went along trying to fool croppies here and there. Of course they did. But most of the crop circle makers, the circle makers out there, are doing it because they feel it's what they have to do. They feel it's a part of themselves. It's almost like they can't stop themselves doing it now.
Yes.
There is a need, a yearning to do this, as if it's part of their genes, their inner matrix, to actually construct these now. You know, what another good story I've got comes from actually my wife, Sue, who worked in the Barge pub, which is obviously the crop circle centre, just close to Alton Barnes.
Never heard
she worked
of it.
There for she worked there for a few months, and crop circle makers went in there, and she asked one. She said, "You know, why do you make the crop formation?" She said, "They said, well, what would happen if we didn't make them now?"
Indeed.
And I think that is a quite a profound answer, because it's almost like they can't stop now. It's like, well, maybe the world would end if we didn't stop making them now. It's a very interesting psychological phenomena.
Well, it's certainly a lot of people will be rather upset and disappointed. And I mean, I'm slightly privy to conversations that go on in the crop circle makers world that not everybody is privy to. And some people, you know, they are talking in terms of, well, you know, maybe we should do something, you know, like stop, or maybe we should sort of maybe put them outside the area so that, you know, people know that we're doing it. But this theme keeps coming back up, and it came up again. It's come up again this year. It came up again. It came up last year for the first time, and was put out by myself. I believe I put it on YouTube and told people there's this kind of consensus idea, and if you want to see whether I'm right or wrong, that the crop circles won't appear in the central area this year. Okay, they might by the end of the season, but certainly at the beginning of the season, they may not appear in the central area. And lo and behold, strangely enough, they didn't. Now, that doesn't mean that little old moi, Matt Williams, had anything to do with that, because I'm not making circles at the moment. You know, I stopped making circles, and I mean, I've made one or two, but I am not in the real circle making clan of you know, the people out there doing this stuff. But I mean, I'm privy to certain information and certain things they want to get out there. Now, how would I know that? That's the point I'm trying to make, is how would I know that people who are making these circles, you know, were going to go out? I have to know this information. I have to know that they're not going to do them in this area. I can't make that statement out of my head. I'm not a channeler with 100% accuracy. So I've got this information. It's happened. What do people think about that? Well, are you aware that not many people actually talked about this? Because a lot of people said, what? You know, what? So this was predicted, and I'm like, yes, it was predicted. Did you know about it? Were you aware of this?
I did, yes. Absolutely.
You knew about it, yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was coming up, and I knew that that the intention was to try and keep all the formations out of the areas, the obvious areas of Alton Barnes,
yes,
and Avebury. I mean, there are various reasons for that, one of which had been problems towards the end of the previous years with farmers.
Too hot? No.
I understand that there was a certain amount of antagonism towards circle makers at the end of 2009. I mean, the end of the season, that they were trying to get police patrolling the areas at night. They were going out themselves with vehicles with searchlights on, scanning the fields late at night, trying to catch people in the act in a way which had never been there really in the past. And I think this was one of the reasons why they decided to keep out the central area and use new areas, which is exactly what happened. So we got some incredible stuff around the areas of Wilton, back across in the area of Warminster, and this was the reason why.
It was a refreshing change for sure, because I mean, everyone gets so used to seeing things in the same area,
Yeah.
and they almost forget that there is a Wiltshire. You know, Wiltshire is out there, and lovely places and sacred sites, stone circle sites.
Yeah.
A lot of people who should be into those things don't get to see them. And I think the Circle Makers wanted to kind of remind people, like, hello, you know, there are other things out there as well. Come and have a look at these interesting places. And it worked to great effect, I think, really. But there's been rumours about things going to be happening this year, or maybe not happening this year. It'll be interesting to see what does happen, I'm sure. But so channeled ideas, you talked about. You think the Circle Makers are maybe channeling ideas? You familiar with, I'm saying this, I know the answer is going to be yes, obviously, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and his work on morphogenic fields. Yeah. Do you sort of have any parallels with that into crop circles? I'm
not sure that the direct relation to circles, no. I think that generally our brains are a lot more linked than what is ever given credit. I was, strangely enough, only reading about the morphogenetic fields today, and that one of the things that Rupert Sheldrake predicted was the fact that that crosswords in daily papers become progressively easy during the day, because more and more people have done them and solved the different problems of each question, so that the information becomes stronger and stronger in the collective psyche. So if you do it, let's say, on the way home as opposed to on the train going up, you have more of a chance of completing it because the information's out there to be picked up. So if you're intuitive enough, you should be able to draw that information down and complete the crossword quicker than anybody else. So I like that. I've never heard that before. And that's very clever, because I think that if you come to crop circles, something similar could be going on. You know, the more fluent the designs come, I think that the more other people can interpret what's going on towards. I mean, why is it that all of the best formations tend to come towards the end of the end of the crop circle seasons, or some of the most spectacular, and the ones that end up most inspiring? The crop circle researchers, right the way through to the next time, often appear like crooked soley formation. Can't remember which year. Is to me the greatest masterpiece, and it was only in the fields just a few hours before it was harvested out. And if it hadn't have been for Stephen Alexander in the air getting photographs of it, we wouldn't even know about it. And to me, that is one of the most. Well, it is the most incredible crop formation that's ever occurred. The amount of symbolism in it is unbelievable. And yeah, as I say, that was the last one of the actual crop formation season. Is it a case that as the season progresses and the complex ideas in the different circle makers and the people's minds become more and more available to the collective psyche, that this is developed, this is created to the point that you actually create these masterpieces? I don't know.
Right.
To me, there's something in that.
Yeah, we've got a picture of the crooked soley circle here, just to give people an idea of what's being mentioned. So that's the crooked soley. It's
the symbolism in that is unbelievable. John Michel, with another co-author whose name escapes me at the moment, wrote a whole booklet all about this, and you really, if you're into crop circles, you need to read this. Now, to me, although this is man-made, this to me is far more interesting than the idea that a space alien might have come down and stamped this into the ground. To me, this shows the human mind at its most extreme, in the sense that it can create marvels of nature in this manner. We won't even start to go into the symbolism at the moment, because everything has symbolism relating to the amount of standing squares of crop that remain, to the amount of squares that were actually removed, to the fact it represents a specific type of DNA. That all relates to all the symbolism. It's quite extraordinary. And the placement of it in the crooked soley area, the position of it, everything was absolutely perfect.
Yes.
And I actually don't know who did that, but whoever it was is a genius. And I bet you that they had no idea what they were doing when they were actually putting it down.
I would imagine that they may not have known exactly where they were putting it down and what it meant, but I do think that people get the inspiration from somewhere, and it definitely means a lot more than the people that plan it actually intended.
They would have known some of it.
Yes, you'd have an idea. The picture looks nice. The picture works for you. The picture resonates. You think, yeah, that looks wonderful. I like this, and but what it actually means to other people could be a hell of a lot more than what you intended. And that's the interesting thing. If if somebody does find something in there which could possibly one day be deciphered into something that proves that circle makers are getting this from somewhere else, it would be an absolutely fantastic thing. That the circle makers didn't know what they were putting into the design. That would be something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that needs to be looked into as a subject of interest in the future.
Yeah.
Particularly when the current circle makers are a little bit more open about who they are, which formations they've actually created. These are some of the questions that need to be posed.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got a couple of questions in the channel, and I think this is going to be an obvious one. You're gonna laugh at this one, but it's the obvious one. So come on then, do you make crop circles?
No, I've never made one and never will.
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit like going into Woolworths and wanting to steal something. You'd probably get away with it, but it'd just be your luck that you got caught, and it would be a blight upon your character forever afterwards. And it's the same thing, really. I mean, I just don't think it would be a clever idea for me as an objective researcher to actually go out there and make them, because if you did get caught, I think it wouldn't be good for you. And also, I think it should be pointed out here that it is actually illegal to create crop circles. Matthew, you know that only too well.
Oh yes.
And for that reason, this is one of the reasons why the names cannot be given of who does what in the fields, because they could be prosecuted, and are actually likely to be prosecuted, because they will be made an example of, and they don't want this. It's going to cost them money that they probably haven't got.
Yeah.
And for this reason, I wouldn't do it. And I think the probably the closest I would ever come is I would happily sit on a local hill looking down on that field,
Watching
knowing that something was going on there if I was asked to come along. But that would be the closest that I would come.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, do you need a criminal record? Is it going to help your life?
I've done some silly things in my past which could have got me criminal records. I mean, daft things in the name of the subject. And unless I would really, really have to do that today, I think I'd rather keep away from that now.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, well, another point which is made by a good friend Wraithy, because he seems to come up with some rather complicated ones, which means it's probably worth putting them through. He says the Yazidis consider, this is back to the original earlier thing, the Yazidis consider the Melek Taus to be a benevolent angel that has redeemed himself from his fall and has become a demiurge who has created the cosmos from the cosmic egg. After he repented, he cried. And it doesn't go on. Cried for, it says. Cries for, and then doesn't go on. And then he's done a link. I don't know what that is, but we'll have a look at the link in a second. But does that mean anything to you?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the Yazidi creation myth.
Yeah.
The whole idea of Malakatus being like a bird of creation, seen most obviously as a...
Can you talk about this for 2 minutes? Are you capable of
Specifically.
yes?
Yes, of
can you
course.
actually
Yeah.
keep this going for 2 minutes? This is a
can-
technical challenge. Keep
Yep.
this going for 2
Let's
minutes.
do that.
You talk for 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Malakatos, basically, as the peacock angel, is a bird of creation, was thought to have produced this divine egg, or in some stories it was actually a pearl, which was dropped out of the the void, if you like, or the abyss of non-existence, to create the universe as we know, to create the world around us, and from this everything else was produced: the stars, the sun, the moon, all the rest of it. And it's this reason that for the Yazidis this became their god, but it was also associated with Azazel, one of the fallen angels, who was one of the leaders of the so-called Watchers of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch being this apocryphal work attributed to the patriarch Enoch of the Book of Genesis fame. And all of that, the story relating to the Watchers, these so-called angels who created the arts and sciences of heaven and gave them to humanity, is a story all related to the area of Eden, the so-called Garden of Eden in the Book of Genesis. And this relates to a specific geographic area, which is the area of southeast Turkey, northern Syria, northern Iraq, that sort of area, which is also the exact same area as the Yazidis. The Yazidis almost certainly preserve myths that go back to Neolithic times and are at least several thousand years old, arguably even 11 to 12,000 years old, and go back to the very earliest stone temples constructed in this region, places like Göbekli Tepe and Navali Kori.
Well, we've got an image up on the screen. Thank you for doing that. We had a technical issue there which needed to be dealt with. So we've got an image up here, which is a link that's been given. Does that mean anything to you? This is the peacock.
Yes, yeah, I recognise that design. That is one
like
of the schools of the Yazidi, I believe, in Germany, actually created that design. I know these people. I've been along to their meetings, and I love them. I mean, if I could be a Yazidi, I would be. But unfortunately, you have to be born into this religion. You can't just join it, I'm afraid.
Ah, right, okay. But I can see what they're talking about, or what Raithi was talking about when he mentioned the design earlier on. I can see how it sort of explodes out like the peacock that we saw just then. So, very interesting stuff. So, electric phenomena and scientific research that needs to be done. Would you have anything you wanted to say about what has been done so far and whether it's valid? Do you think that the research work that has been done so far is valid? And obviously what we'll come on to then is what research work can be done in scientific areas that you think might help. So what do you think's been done so far? And
in the crop circle? In
the crop circle world with scientific research.
I mean, I think the problem that you've got with it, the work of Levengood, Nancy Talbot, the BLT group in America, is that they attempt to try and use evidence of changes going on within the crop, suggesting that there may even be some kind of microwave effect taking place that's changing the structure, blowing the nodes, whatever, in the crop, as evidence that these things are of paranormal nature. And my way of looking at it is that it doesn't mean this at all. I mean, firstly, a lot of the blowing of the nodes in crops, for instance, is something which occurs when the circle making process actually takes place. And I know this because I've spoken to circle makers, and they say they can actually hear the popping going on as they're actually making the formation. So pop, 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 they can actually hear the nodes exploding as they're actually going on. That's point one. So that doesn't need to have the sort of importance put upon it. However, the other idea that there may be changes going on with them, I think, is probably quite true. I think changes probably do go on. And I'll tell you for why. Because we have geomagnetic fields covering the Earth that are easily monitored, both from the ground but more particularly from the air. And that these are subject to changes from a number of different sources, from the sun, from the position of the Earth, the time of year, etc. They're all changing in some way or another. But they're basically natural as far as their, the way they are in the landscape. They're affected obviously by geology, they're affected by volcanism, things like this. But if you create some kind of intrusion within that natural landscape, that virgin landscape if you like, you're going to be affecting that geomagnetic field. And that has all sorts of other implications as well. Gravity, other sort of energetic effects and whatever. Now, if you go to the east, places like China, Japan, Korea, you have Feng Shui masters. Now, Feng Shui is something that has been very much watered down for the Western world over the past 15, 20 years. But over there, you would consult a Feng Shui master that would be brought in if you were going to construct a building, a monument house, and you would ask them how this could be constructed. And they would get out an instrument, a magnetic instrument that would be in tune with the local geomagnetic environment. And they would look at this and they'd say, right, you've got to put a door there, you've got to put windows here, you must not orientate it this way, you must orientate it that way, you must do it with the hills over there and the openness over there. That's what they would do. And if you did this, you would live in harmony with the local landscape, in harmony with the local geomagnetic fields and variations. If you didn't consult them and you just did your own thing, then it would be considered that you'd produce bad energy, bad chi energy, which was known as SHA. And that SHA would bring with it ill omens, bad luck, bad health, nothing would go right in the house, etc., etc., etc. In other words, the bodily systems, the mind, the body, all the rest of it would be affected in some way. Now, that's out there. Now, clearly, similar things were going on in the West. We don't know much about it. What we do know is that there were fairy consultants in Ireland, for instance, who were brought in for similar reasons, so that you didn't upset the fairy routes, the fairy paths. So that if you were going to build a new building, you did it in harmony with the fairy paths. A door had to be, let's say in the east and in the west, so that the fairies could walk in, go past through the house and out the other side. Because if you disturbed them, upset them in a certain way, you'd get the same type of effects as a Feng Shui master would tell you we would get if you interrupted the chi energies out there. It's the same thing. Yes. Now, if you're creating crop formations in a virgin landscape, and I mean virgin, I mean where you got, naturally, we can see it as that, growing crops, and you create these incredible complex geometric patterns. Do you think this is going to affect the local geomagnetic field? Of course it is. It's really going to affect it. How? We're not sure. I mean, sometimes it's good, sometimes it might be bad. Sometimes people might feel ill when they go into them. Mind you, somebody else might go into the same formation and feel great. Yes, might be healed. It's a personal thing. And I think that this is one of the reasons why you get this. Plus, I think that this is also the explanation of why you get so-called orbs and lights appearing with such frequency in these same environments. Because what's happening, you are getting disturbance in the geomagnetic fields. That's creating other energetic effects. which is affecting sort of electrodynamics and things like this. And this is producing light phenomena, either bursts of light, which I know have been seen by circle makers as they've been producing the formations themselves, or more sustained light, so-called plasmas, which have been very often reported in crop circle locations.
Yes. Well, Roger CCC says, "You're talking sense, Andrew, thanks." That was a little while back, but I'm sure it applies for now. What you're talking about with changing fields or changing these geomagnetic fields, I've spoken to people in the past interested in dowsing and this sort of stuff, and I've heard it from them that you can create an area that can be dowsed with intent. You can actually make an area dowsable by your thought, by your intention, and other people can then come along and find that spot that you've created. And I've even heard it said that there are some groups out there that may be into sort of the occult, witchcraft, this sort of stuff, who actually go to sacred sites and try to flip their energies from good to bad, or white to black, or plus to minus, or whatever. Not to say, necessarily bad, but they try to flip the energy the other way, and then you have cleanup agents, like cleanup dowsers, who go around and try to recorrect it back the way they think it should be. Do you have any familiarity with this sort of stuff? Because
yes, I do a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe later on in the year I'll come back and talk to you about what we call black questing, which is going out to ancient and prehistoric and sacred sites and cleaning up the mess of occultists who have affected the energies, possibly even left what we call fixing markers to try and change the energies at these sites, and the whole quest involved in trying to find these markers and removing them. That was the subject of a book I did called The Black Alchemist a good few years ago. A remastered version is coming out this year.
Yes. You did say you'd come and perhaps have a chat with us about that at a future date.
I mean, but
it's a bit too big for tonight, isn't it?
Can affect it. Yeah. But I think that anybody can. I think that simply by attuning to a site, even from afar, you can affect the energies, which is one of the reasons why, I work with something we call psychic questing, which is working with psychic information to get goals, whether it be solving historic enigmas, exploring landscape mysteries, or finding hidden artifacts. This is something I've done for the last 30 odd years as well.
Yes.
And sometimes somebody will come up, will dream about a site somewhere we've never been to before, some obscure spot, and they might see some kind of ghost or figure or apparition or something there, or a spirit guardian, and they might be calling you to go there for some reason. Now, you want to try and explore this and find out if this is something that is real, and that you should be looking into this, and if so, eventually go out there. Now, this is what we call a live questing situation. We never tell outsiders where we're going.
Right.
For two reasons. Firstly, it's almost like it's bad luck. The more you tell people, the more it waters down what you're doing. But secondly, I do generally believe that if you told people that you were going to a certain place, their own mental inquisitiveness would make them think about the same site, and they would affect the energies before you actually got there.
Yeah.
I do genuinely believe this. I think that if you're looking for answers of how this is possible, you need to be looking at the quantum concept of entanglement and non-locality.
I was just going to use that same word myself. Yes, it sounds very much like quantum entanglement, doesn't it? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, this is it. So when it comes to crop circles, people are going to affect them as soon as they walk into them. The more they think about them, the more they start thinking about aliens, the more they start thinking about lights, the more that they start thinking about weird experiences, the more it's going to heighten the effects of what actually goes on at such places. And for this reason, it's obvious why so much phenomena is connected with them. People create the environment, the garden in which this stuff can play.
Yes.
Plus, I think it's important to point out that when you're dealing with areas like Alton Barnes, Avebury, Silbury Hill, these sort of areas, and Warminster, for instance, these places have seen strange phenomena for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yes.
It may even have been the reason why there are so many prehistoric sites in these areas.
People were drawn.
Yeah,
Yes.
they were drawn in there, they'd have their own visionary experiences, they might see stuff themselves and think there's something special about the landscape, let's create our stone circles here. That's a theory, we can't prove it, but there's some good evidence to suggest this is the case, particularly when there might be geological links producing lights and whatever. However, I also think that if you're dealing with lights in particular, like aerial light forms, UFOs, orbs, plasmas, that these things have their own sentience, their own intelligence, and I think they pick up on this, that the intelligences behind them are aware of people calling out to them, and I think that there are situations where they do actually respond to the fact that people are calling out. I do not see this as too fantastic, because I think that they themselves are intelligences that are also inquisitive. They're opportunists, and they will appear on certain occasions, and people will have either sightings or even close encounters out of such circumstances. Right.
Yes. Do you think, or what's your opinion then, speaking to people who are into this, or yourself, when circle makers have created these sites and done something to the landscape in this way, what do people say about that? That are into the realms of questing and geomancy and that sort of stuff. What do they think? Should humans be doing this, or do they think that we're interfering in some way? You obviously.
To be honest, I think this is a new subject of interest. What we're talking about tonight is not openly discussed very often, and it's certainly not in very many books. I talk about it in the new Circle Makers.
Yes.
If people are interested in this sort of stuff, but probably even in there, I haven't gone far enough. I think this is the areas that people should be exploring. There isn't very much about this out there, in all honesty.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, human circle makers up to this point have been seen as hoaxers.
Yes.
Trying to deliberately fool people into believing that crop formations are of alien or supernatural construction, and that's it. That's their game. They're tricksters, and that alone.
Yes.
That needs to change.
Yes.
And I think it also needs to change amongst the circle makers themselves. They need to understand that the role that they're playing has been recognised, and that with this they should see themselves not as outsiders but a part of the crop circle community.
Yes.
And the croppies have to understand this as well. They need to know that the people that are making the formations, whether they know them by name, by sight, or whatever, they're not the evil enemy. They are part of that same community. Even if they don't get along with them as buddies, they are part of the community, and they have to accept that fact. That's not to say that everybody's got to be friends and they've got to like each other. They just got to accept that everybody's playing a role here.
Yeah, sure. What do you think about the concept that maybe what circle makers have unexpectedly tapped into is really just a rediscovery of something that maybe ancient man was a little bit more in tune with, in tune with himself, in tune with nature, looking at the skies and trying to sort of work out, symbolism and relating it into his life, and then maybe drawing that on walls, putting it in stone circles, and then that whole energy of believing in what is there, creating something bigger, something that does actually have effects that make balls of light appear to large crowds of people, and maybe they worship these things because of their power. Maybe
Absolutely.
These days we throw this away. We say, look at those silly people from the past, with their stone circles. What the hell were they thinking? And really, maybe circle makers, I think, kind of stumbled upon something by mistake, really.
Well, something else I was reading just today is the whole story of Fatima in Portugal in 1917, after some children saw visions of a woman interpreted as the Virgin Mary. These apparitions said that they would return and they would prove to the world that something big was going on here. So everybody gathered on a day that was predicted where this was all going to happen. And not only did various, tens of thousands of people see these apparitions appearing, but that they also saw a dancing sun, a second sun in the sky. And there seems to be absolutely no doubt that this event occurred. And there were tens of thousands of people present, most of which presumably saw and would have been able to come away from this and say, yes, this was real. Now, what is to say that something like that might not be able to happen again? If enough people believe that something is going to occur, and there are genuine signs that this is actually going to take place, not some just created thing, that people are generally having communications with what they see as an external intelligence, apparitions or something, and they say, look, something is going to occur on a certain day, please, if you are interested in this subject, come to Avebury, go to Alton Barnes or whatever. I think that we could get phenomena like this occurring again. Right. But I think it will only occur if there is a harmony in the people there. I think that people have to come at this from a slightly different angle. I'm doing a book at the moment called Light Quest, which addresses all of these points and everything about it, which will come out hopefully later on this year. Again, I'll come back and talk to you about that. But I want people to think completely differently about UFOs, about crop circles. We have to make a new beginning with it. We have to start again. I think we've got too much entrenched with nuts and bolts spacecraft, alien agendas, lizard-headed aliens enslaving the human race. And are actually forgetting that we're dealing here with intelligences which coexist with us, most of the time invisibly, part of the time as powerful, intense sources of light that can manifest in whatever way we want, be them aliens, fairies, Jesus and the saints if we want. And we need to know how to interact with them. We need to know what's going on here. And I think that if we can do that, we genuinely can make things happen.
Well, it's powerful stuff. Powerful stuff indeed. We've yes, I was going to say we can give you a breather for a second, and we'll take some questions, and we'll lighten the tone a bit. I think somebody earlier on said, "Oh, don't worry about stealing from Woolworths; they're easy," or something like that.
They're closed now anyway. They
are. They're no longer about. Darthy is asking. He says it's not sure if it's relevant enough, but your guest is very knowledgeable. Would he like to take on the Norway spiral? You know that?
Yeah, I know the Norway spiral.
I think I know what he means as well. That video footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe it probably was just a missile going out of control, looking very, very spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, I've asked around about this. I've asked people that know, engineers and whatever, and it seems that is the best possible explanation. And to me, I have no reason to look at it any further. I do find it intriguing. Around the same time there were various other reports of similar ones. One in Australia, I seem to recall, one I believe off the coast of California, and another one, if I recall rightly, in Russia. And of course, when all these sort of things come together, you begin to start looking at a bigger picture, whether something else is going on here. But I think on a rational level, no, it is coincidence. If you want to look at it on a quantum lateral level, yeah, maybe you should be looking at it, in this way. Maybe you should try and find a higher meaning for it. But I can't find that at the moment. To me, this is not making sense. I mean, more irrational and far more interesting is why so many birds and animals are falling dead at the moment.
Yes, indeed.
Increasingly around the world. although the naturalists might tell us that it's all just coincidence, if it continues to occur, I think we should be starting to look for reasons for this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people saying things like, that animals do die a lot like this. This does happen, but it just happened to be that they all happen to do it at the same time. You sometimes get clusters of bird deaths and fish deaths and things like this, but it was particularly sort of large at this on this particular occasion. So yes, very interesting stuff. But the spiral has been up on screen now. We've shown that one, so hopefully that's answered your question a little bit. Right, we've got a question from Dion. Do you want to pick up the mic? We'll get Agent S. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it.
Oh, hang on.
To chase these
There you
comments.
Sorry.
Just bear with me a second. I've got to find it.
That's all right. You just take your time, love. Goodness gracious. What do we not pay you for? So this is the type of thing, I get stuck with these, MI5 just issue me these temps, and they just come along and...
Oi, bug off.
Yeah, right.
So I was hoping he would have rewritten it again. I know he asked it 3 times already. It's something to do with if you don't make circles at all, then
that's right.
Don't you have an interest in making a circle for an experience of something extraterrestrial?
I think it was something like, so if you thought you could contact ETs by making crop circles, why don't you do one?
Firstly, I think we have to start looking at what are ETs. I personally do not believe that UFOs are representative of aliens coming from another planet. I do not. I believe that UFOs are light forms, sometimes with structure, that are created from plasma. Plasma is the full state of matter in our terms, but in the universe it's the first state of matter. And there is a lot of good scientific work going on at the moment suggesting that another type of life exists in plasma environments. Again, this is something that I look at in great depth in LightQuest, which will be out soon, and that UFOs are themselves the entities, and that the light beings and the entities that people see emerging from them are part of a greater whole that is an intelligence in its own right, that is pure energy, consciousness and light that manifests. And this does not come from outer space. It's something that coexists with us all the time. The intelligences themselves will probably exist on a higher dimensional level and interpenetrate into our world through plasma environments. And that because since 1947 we associate so-called flying saucers, UFOs, with aliens, when we get too close to them, that is what we will see. Just in the same way that in the past, when we got too close to these lights, we will see the fairies and the elves and the little people and the goblins and the devils or whatever.
Yes.
Today we see space aliens. Devout Christians, when they got too close to them in the past, saw Jesus and the saints and entered realms of paradise. And this is the way we see it. We choose to interpret this phenomenon at the moment as extraterrestrials.
Yes.
That's not to say that extraterrestrials don't exist out there. Of course they almost certainly do. But that what's happening down here with the UFOs is not good representation of extraterrestrials. I don't believe that they are them at all.
Yeah, I know that author Jenny Randalls, I think she referred to them as something like trigger phenomena or something like that. Was it like there's a trigger phenomena? Yeah. That's the real crux. That's the thing that's there. But how you then interpret it changes, and that has I think is it called cultural tracking or something like that?
I don't know these terms. She's done some very, very good books.
And John Spencer was mentioned with his book Perspectives, talking about very much the same sort of thing, I think, really.
Well, I think that in a way it's what any good cutting-edge researcher get onto eventually.
Mm.
I mean, I address the alien agenda in Light Quest simply because so many people are into it.
Mm.
So many people believe that the Greys are here to create some kind of hybrid race that will eventually take over control of the world.
Mm.
So many people believe that there's lizard-headed aliens trying to enslave the human race, and that if we don't all prepare for ascension in 2012, we've got big problems.
Oh, yes.
I can't handle this, I'm afraid.
2012, yes.
The more people believe in this, in all honesty, the more it will become real.
That's a good point. You know, the more that people do actually dwell on, you know, is something going to go wrong? Maybe if enough people believe it, it will.
It will,
Mm.
absolutely. I mean, that's the way that UFOs became associated with aliens and in the first place. That's why in previous centuries they were associated with the fairies, because we interpret them as such. It's our interpretation. And I believe these intelligences that are genuinely behind the UFOs, they don't, when I say they don't have, they probably don't have a flesh and blood form. I believe that they are pure energy, intelligent, sentient energy that can appear to us in whatever way we want. Whatever way our minds want to accept them. And the closer we get to them, the more we enter what I see in terms of a shifted reality. Jenny Randalls refers to it as the Oz factor, where everything starts going wobbly.
You got
around
it, the Oz factor. That
Oz
was it.
factor. But
Yes.
even closer, and you enter what I call a multi-dimensional environment, or a bubble universe, as I call it.
Yep.
And that bubble universe is essentially of our making in association with the intelligence behind the light form, and a little bit of the collective unconscious of what the world expects to happen under such circumstances.
Yes.
We see this in terms of abductions at the moment, but what occurs here is far, far more interesting. Missing time episodes are the key to future understanding of knowledge and enlightenment. I mean, and to me, people aren't just taken away on a spacecraft for a number of hours or a few days. They are removed from space-time completely. And for them, although it might seem like they're somewhere else, and indeed they are somewhere else, the time frame connected with that does not relate to space-time down here at all. It bears no relationship whatsoever. They are away from space-time. I give examples where people encounter the lights, it all goes wobbly, then after that it's hours later. They haven't gone anywhere. The space-time has just warped. They've jumped space and time.
Yes.
And weirdly enough, only just this week, I was aware of Jenny Randalls having done work on so-called time storms, which are like sort of weird clouds that envelop people, and it all goes a bit funny and time's lost, whatever. But I didn't realise she'd written a whole book on it called Time Storms, which came out in 2001. Just ordered that, but she seems to have been coming to almost identical conclusions. And this is great, I mean, because I've been coming to the same conclusions and in my books, The Circle Makers, Alien Energy, 1994, obviously New Circle Makers, and now Light Quest. And it's so important that it's not just me coming to these conclusions, that other people are doing so as well. You know, she is definitely one of the pioneers in the field. Paul Devereaux is another, Jacques Vallée is another, John Keel is another. You know, these people's books really need to be looked at very closely.
Yes, I mean, what we should mention as well is since moving to the area, the Marlborough area, you've now sort of embraced the area fully, and you're starting to sort of do little events now. I think you mentioned something about the psychic questing event. Yes, and that's in 17th of 18th of September.
That's correct.
Oh God, I can write and read.
Yeah,
I'm good, aren't I? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
What's all that about?
Tickets have gone on sale just yesterday for the Psychic Questing weekend in September in Avebury. every different aspect of psychic questing, which is, you know, working with psychic intuitive information towards some kind of goal. This year, some of the themes are quantum questing, the trickster element, different quests that we've worked on in the past, Renly Chateau revelations. If you're into the whole Renly Chateau and that sort of stuff, you've got to come along to this. We will be making big announcements relating to new findings there, and much more. Visits to sites, panel debate, other people giving their own talks on the Sunday. 25 quid the whole weekend. That's all your parking, as much tea, coffee and biscuits as you can handle, and good fun for everybody. Oh, and an artefact retrieval on the Saturday night, somewhere within the henge.
Excellent, okay. Might be having a slight technical problem here because we've got a frame stopped of you, and that's what we've got at the moment. So I'm very reticent to unplug and replug the camera because I know it might cause absolute mayhem, but I think we're going to have to do that. So psychic questing, 17th and 18th September. What can you tell us about some of your books? We could bring those up on the screen and you can have a little chat about those because that doesn't require the picture of your face. We'll bring the picture of the book up and then I'm going to try and unplug the camera. Now hopefully it's not all going to go Pete Tong here, but what can you tell us very briefly about your book, The Cygnus Mystery, what that's about?
Well, we all know that there are certain constellations in the sky that played a great role to our distant ancestors. Orion, the Pleiades, Ursa Major. But one of the other big ones which has received relatively little publicity is Cygnus, also known as the Northern Cross. This is prominently positioned on the Milky Way, where the Milky Way breaks into two, with a big dark area down its middle known as the Cygnus Rift, the Dark Rift or the Great Rift. And this point in the sky was seen as the entrance and exit into the sky world for cultures both in the old world and the new world, and these seem to be ideas that go back all the way to the ancient cave art, Ice Age cave art of Western Europe, as far back as 30,000 BC, and that it almost certainly, Cygnus almost certainly influenced the foundations of all of the major religions around the world, from Christianity to Islam to Hinduism to Buddhism, and that it's, you know, I mean, to me, I like championing the underdog. The Cygnus is definitely an underdog, so that's why I wrote a whole book about it.
Excellent, okay. Very quickly then, should we have a look at this book, The Gods of Eden?
Gods of Eden.
Very
okay.
quickly, we've got a few books we can go through.
Basically shows that Egyptian civilization is many thousands of years older than what conventional Egyptology has us believe. That various of the monuments, the foundations, the early records of like demigods and gods stem from an epoch at the end of the last ice age when there was some kind of cataclysm, and that all of this is remembered within ancient Egyptian myth and influenced the building of the pyramids and the Sphinx and whatever. Right,
okay. Have we got any other books there? We're just going to have a little look through. What about Beneath the Pyramids?
Beneath the Pyramids is about our discovery of an entirely unknown cave underworld within sight of the Great Pyramid at Giza. A cave world that is totally natural, many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years old, that had never ever been explored in modern times. The reason why we got to know about it was a journal of a British explorer and diplomat by the name of Henry Salt, who in 1917 wrote about it. Yes,
yeah,
that's part of it. On screen,
yeah.
Showing me inside the caves there.
There you go.
It's just amazing that every Egyptologist who ever has investigated the Giza Plateau missed it.
Yeah.
And it was originally, as soon as we found it, we went to see the top man there, Dr. Zahi Hawass. We told him about it. He threw an epi and basically said that, no such caves existed. But then finally, obviously realising their value, he goes to explore them himself with a TV crew in tow, the results of which are an episode of the reality show Chasing Mummies, which is being shown on UK and European History Channel in March. The episode is called Bats, B-A-T-S.
Right. It's interesting. When I went to Egypt and with a friend who was on a bit of a sort of crazy questing thing that didn't come to very much. I think a lot of expectations there about being taken off the planet by UFOs and it was a free holiday for me. But I went to see Mr. Hawass and convinced him that I was some sort of history student and we liked his work and we were going to go and see him in London and all this sort of stuff. But with the intention of going to see the Sphinx. And he said, yeah, okay. And he let us go out and see the Sphinx up close. And we had a look around the back, which most people don't. I think I've mentioned this before but on the show. But we had a very special experience. We found that there was a hole around the back of the Sphinx. And you could actually climb up underneath the tail. That's right. Almost one could imagine the anus of the Sphinx.
Yeah, it's rather ironic that the whole of the Sphinx should be up its anus. But
yes.
No,
I found some interesting things there.
It is there.
I found some interesting things there. I found Coke cans and crisp packets crammed into the space, and nice. I just wondered what you found up there when you went.
I've never been up the anus of the Sphinx, I'm afraid.
You haven't lived, mate. You haven't lived.
But one strange, funny little story here is that Cleopatra's Needle in London has got two huge bronze sphinxes either side of it that were manufactured in the 19th century, and one of those has got a hole in its anus as well, just out of interest.
Oh, right. Okay.
And at one point in the past on a psychic quest we actually found an object up it, but I think we should perhaps veer away from this subject. Actually,
it's all right, we're past the watershed, but we'll just go off it anyway, why not? Okay, so have we got any questions in channel now? This is a good opportunity to remind people. We did ask you earlier on if you wanted to Skype into us on the show. You can do that, and you can ask a question directly to Andy. And if you want to do that, let us know by sending us a little text, and then we can ring you, and you're more than welcome to ask a question. So now's the time to be doing that, because we're about 10 to 11, and I don't know what time we're going to keep you on till. We have no constrictions here. We can carry on as long as you're happy to carry on, and we haven't exhausted anything. But we haven't taken any questions, and usually when we do, it goes on for quite some time. So would you like to see if anybody would want to Skype in? Is anybody wanting to Skype in? Hang on, right. Well, we'll see. We'll ask a couple of questions from the... somebody was saying Hall of Records, which is obviously to do with Egypt. Could you talk very briefly about that? I know it's supposed to be crop circles, but I'm just asking the questions that are in channel. So,
well, the Hall of Records is the idea that there's some kind of hidden chamber or secret chamber somewhere in the vicinity of the Sphinx that's like a repository of lost knowledge and information about a previous race that existed in Egypt at the end of the last ice age, and it's been locked away since that time, and that this American psychic known as the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce, predicted that it would be discovered eventually. He didn't give a specific date, and the organisation behind Edgar Cayce, his modern day followers, known as the Association of Research and Enlightenment, the ARE, have dedicated a lot of time, money and effort into looking for the Hall of Records in the last 50 odd years. I think that something like this does exist. I don't just think it's like a sort of library of the past. I think it is a chamber that may contain some kind of crystal or sacred stone representing the point of first creation in the universe, almost like the centre or navel of the world, and that possibly on the walls are some kind of creation text, maybe the original of the so-called pyramid texts. And a lot of people believe this. A lot of people go to Egypt to try and find it. And the closest anybody has come to finding its entrance is our discovery of this cave system in 2008. Because we've discovered only a small portion of the caves. We know that they continue on. We've got geological maps, aerial surveys, radar maps that suggest that the cave system continues on towards the centre of the three pyramids, the second pyramid, and we think that this hidden chamber might well be in that area. And old legends talk about this very spot as being the tomb of Hermes, like the great founder of Egyptian civilization. And that it's said that he lies there with this object on his lap called the Emerald Tablet, on which are written the secrets of creation. Somehow this is some kind of metaphor for this chamber of first creation that I was talking about.
Right.
It's something that I wrote about in detail in Beneath the Pyramids, and I shall be writing about again in the not too distant future.
Okay, great. We've got a question from somebody, let's just call him Nat. We'll leave the last names out. He says, my question then, do you think that the planet is a sentient being, like Plato, Rupert Sheldrake and others? I think he's saying they're suggesting that, Therefore, and maybe some kind of connection to a Morphean realm, whatever Morphean realm means. Do you know what that means?
I do.
Ah, okay. Perhaps you can explain.
Well, Morphean is a term which I came up with back in the mid-80s and popularised only in the last decade or so, that there may be some kind of intelligence that controls the development of intelligent life within the actual universe. It exists beyond normal space-time, so in a way it sees all. It will see any part of time and history, both in the past, the present, and obviously the future. So in other words, they can see what's happening from the alpha, the omega, the beginning of to the end of the universe, and their role is to make sure that the universe develops in the way it's supposed to and ends in the way it's supposed to, and that when it starts veering off course, they will do things to push it back on the course. That's my concept of the Morpheans. The reason I call them Morpheans was a name that just came to me, but it means shapeshifters, changers. They can appear to us in dreams, in visions, in whatever way is necessary for us to take notice.
I see.
A little bit like in one of the Back to the Future films that the guy, was his name, is it McFly, appears as Darth Vader to convince his dad to do something or whatever. It's whatever's necessary to convince you that you've got to do something. And this was a concept of the Morpheans. They're almost like the guardians of the universe, the guardians of reality. And that they're affecting us here on Earth. They are inspiring us in different ways to do things. It's like the Great Pyramid. We talked about the architect here being inspired. Well, who was he inspired by? What type of intelligence inspired him? And I would say that almost certainly it was Morphean inspired intelligence, because I think that the day that he sat down and started doing the plan for the Great Pyramid, he thought, what should we do? We'll incorporate this in, we'll incorporate that. Oh, what size should we have it? Oh, we'll do it this, whatever. That whatever was coming through him, he didn't realise that in several thousand years' time, there would be so much interesting focus upon this monument, which, although at that time was being constructed for eternity, so many other monuments that were also constructed for eternity back at that time, crumbled into dust long ago. The Great Pyramid is one of the most important, influential buildings in the world today. Now, who would have predicted that back in 2600 BC? or whenever it was that the architects sat down. So, in other words, there's a reasoning for this, and it may well be that the pyramid has a role to play in human evolution, the way it affects our minds, and that the day that guy sat down and said, "Oh, we need to create a monument for the pharaoh. How should we design it?" It was crucial that he came out with this information at that time, at that moment, to create the design that we know and love today. That's an example of a nexus point that needs to be controlled to make sure it happens in human evolution. And that's where the Morphians come in and ensure that that happens, that no other influence, and there may well be others that want to try and swing it in another direction, get there first and mess it up, as it were. I mean, it's a little bit like the Morphian perspective of things is a little bit like you thinking of your favourite film.
Right.
You know, just think of your favourite film, whatever it is. You've seen it 100 times and you know virtually every line in it. What would happen if you watched that film and somebody who was meant to meet somebody didn't? And you think, oh my God, they've not met them. That means this is not going to happen. That's not going to happen. This, and then the whole film will end completely differently. What if you could then try and get into the film at that point, appear to the person and try and persuade them that they've got to meet that person, or they've got to say,
you jump in and
do it. Well, that's what the Morphians do.
Yeah.
It's a concept. It's a theory that I have, something I like to talk about. Could all just be imagination, who knows, but I like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I think you see these strange men in black characters turning up in Fringe. Do you watch Fringe?
Not often. Haven't
No.
got into that.
Yeah, they seem to be able to know what's coming in time, and they seem to sort of head off events or make things happen because they meant to happen that way. So they make sure they kind of, if somebody was meant to die but something else has happened and that person isn't going to die, they make sure that they do die.
Well, then that's Morphians. That's exactly what I would call the Morphians.
Yes, these men in black characters in Fringe. If anybody hasn't watched Fringe, watch it. It's fucking great.
Okay.
So that's official. So we've got somebody on the line. We've actually got a Skype guest. Now we'll call him Mr. G because we're cryptic. But Mr. G, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Right. We'll just put you online. So might be a bit of echo, but don't worry about that. It doesn't come out. So Mr. G, what would you like to ask Mr. A?
Hi, Mr. A.
Hello there, Mr. G.
Hi, Matt. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on this wonderful CirclemakersTV.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
And congratulate Andy Thomas on the excellent research there into the circle makers in particular.
Make sure you put your check in the post to him.
I was interested, Andy, what do you think of the UFOs over Jerusalem?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're talking here about a series of 3 to 4 videos that appeared recently showing a light ball that is seemingly stationary above Jerusalem in the area of the Holy Mount, and then there seems to be a flash and that object then shoots up into the sky very fast. Now, incredible pieces of footage. Are they genuine? Maybe. Certainly there have been CGI versions done to try and take the story onto the next level. And of course what this has meant is that even if the earlier videos are genuine, then people start looking at them and saying, well, they could also be CGI. And I think that this is the inherent problem here, that even if they are genuine, because in this day and age, videos like this can be created so easily, it's a little bit like the whole crying wolf story today, in the sense that nobody is really going to take them seriously. Nobody is going to look at them and say this is good evidence of UFOs, of UFO activity. And I've actually been in touch with a gentleman who was the first person to bring them to light on the internet. I mean, when I say that, to promote it, the first one came up online. He noticed it several hours later and promoted it, and that's why it got so many hits. And he's spoken to the guy that took the footage, who claims that it's genuine. But my questions to this person, the one that promoted it first, is, look, were there other people in Jerusalem that saw it that didn't happen to have a camcorder or a video phone ready when this was actually taking place? Because even though the event occurred at 1 o'clock in the morning, there must have been a hell of a lot of people that saw this. Was it reported in the local papers, quite separate to these videos? If so, I might start believing in it more. Now, that's not to say that the videos aren't genuine. I have no definitive answer on whether they are or they're not. Because, I would love to get to the bottom of this story, and I would love more information. So if anybody out there has got more information, I'll happily receive it. But just to summarise here, it almost doesn't matter whether they're genuine. Nobody's really going to take them seriously. They're not going to be seen as the best evidence in the world of UFOs, I'm afraid.
Does that answer your question, Mr. G?
Yes, thank you, Andy. That's really great.
Okay, have you got any other questions, or?
Well, not really, not at the moment, Matt.
Okay,
just
no problem.
Congratulating you on just a wonderful show. Really, it's refreshing to see such open-mindedness broadcast about crop circles.
It is refreshing, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Certainly.
It is actually. It'll be nice to get other people. It's wonderful to have your guest on, and people like Colin Andrews, perhaps, and other people in the future.
He's been asked,
which
and
would be
he
great,
seems
wouldn't
quite
it?
keen. Yep. We're going to try for that as well in the future. It might have to be a Skype thing, though. We might have to do him audio.
Right.
Maybe get him in on a webcam. But good suggestion. And anybody wants to suggest any potential guests for the show, please feel free to.
Also, Rob Irving as well.
Rob Irving, we've asked. He was in Channel last week, he's considering it. He says. So he hasn't said no. So I think that might mean a yes at some point. So well, thanks very much for that then, and we'll.
You're welcome.
We'll go off now onto another question which somebody's got. It's a simple question, but I suppose it actually means quite a lot, really, when you think about it. Why are the formations made to be seen from above? Why not make them to be better perceived from the ground? So, like more conventional art. Do you think there's a reason that these things have to be done like that?
Yes, I do. I think that it's a tradition that probably goes back many thousands of years, and is more obviously displayed in the Nazca geoglyphs, which are also only visible from the air, through to the White Horse of Uffington, for instance, which only can truly be seen from the air, and even Avebury, the circles and the avenues at Avebury, they would never have been seen properly unless from the air. I think that there is a human need to create structures in whatever medium it be, to give the impression that they are doing this as signs to something above, signs towards some kind of higher order or higher intelligence that exists out there or above, up there somewhere. And I believe that this is one of the reasons why the crop circles are placed wherever they are, and that they're not always, as you quite rightly say, placed obviously on the ground where everybody can see them. There's a hidden element here, something that has to be seen only from the air, that gives an aerial component. It's part of an ancient tradition that goes back many thousands of years.
Okay, well, that's probably answered that one for you. We've got a caller. We'll just call Mr. N, and he should be on the line now. Can you hear us, Mr. N? Well, we're going to call him again. Sorry, keeps on putting his thing down, and we're not going to say what his thing is. Even though we're after the watershed. Hello, there you go.
Sorry. It's on,
You'll have to mute your live stream, by the way, because otherwise we'll get a terrible audio lag, which is what we're getting at the moment. You are on to us, don't worry. But what you need to do is mute the live stream, and then you can just go ahead and answer your question. Ask your question, sorry.
terrible audio lag, which is what we're getting at the moment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You'll have to press pause on the live stream if you're going to do it, because otherwise we'll hear you twice.
Hang on.
I'm sorry.
In which time we can ask Andy whether or not he can do any dance routines and any. Can you do any sort of things with your hands, like shadows against the blue screen?
I'll have to think about it.
Lost my mouse.
Can you do any sort of
Mr. N, are you able to do this, or are we?
shadows against the blue screen?
I'm not sure if he knows what we're talking about here. Do you know how to mute your live stream, sir?
I'm still here.
You're still there. We seem to
I
be able
can
to.
hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm trying to do that. I've got a bit of a
You're still there.
technical.
We can hear you.
We can hear it coming back. Anyway, ask your question, and what I'll do is I'll fade it down when you start to double up on yourself. So ask the question quickly. Go on.
Okay. Hi, Andy.
Hiya.
Coming back. Anyway, ask your question, and what I'll do is I'll fade it down.
There you go. That's the double. Ask the question, then go on.
My question is.
Coming back. Anyway, ask your question, and what I'll do is I'll
It's so distracting, isn't it? Go on, then. You're going to have to ask your question with it going in the background.
Okay. Could you tell me more about Nexus points?
It's so distracting, isn't it? Go on then.
There you go. I'll have to fade you out. Sorry.
Okay.
There, you'll get your answer now. You can fade your live stream
we're talking about again the whole idea of the Morphians and they're guardians of Nexus points. What's a Nexus point? Well, I'll give you a good example. Hitler. One day he decided that he'd commit suicide. So he got a gun and was just about to shoot to himself, and his maid came along and stopped him. Now, she convinced him not to kill himself. Now, as whether this story is apocryphal or exactly as stated is irrelevant. The important point about it is that had she not stopped him, what would the world be like today? It would be completely different. Now, obviously, in the name of Hitler and the Nazis, it was the atrocities that changed the world, and you know, something that we don't even have to look into. But the thing is that was such an important nexus point, because what happens if she had not have walked in? So what I'm trying to say is that if there are opposing forces involved, you know, the God and the devil, if you like, then is it not possible that some influences are trying to make him kill himself, and the others are trying to make him, you know, making sure that the event does happen, and whichever's the strongest wins. That's it. Now, the way I see the Morphians is that they know the eventual outcome of the universe, of whether that event is important to take place or not, and they try and ensure that the right decision is made at that nexus point. And I think that we have to look at the other possibility of the whole idea of the multiverse, and the idea that every time a decision is made, that some kind of echo universe is created, so that, you know, the fact that I made the decision to come on to Circle television, there may be another universe where I didn't come on to it. So that meant that this broadcast would not have gone out, which meant that people listening to this would have not got new ideas. One or other of those might have gone off and written a book about it, and that would have changed reality, quite literally. As small as that nexus point might seem, on the greater schemes of things along the way, maybe in hundreds, if not thousands of years' time, it will start having a bigger and a bigger echo and a ripple. Well, that's what a nexus point is. It's a point of decision that's going to have a hell of a lot of effect in the future. And I think that there are guardians over those nexus points, and I like to call them Morphians, and that when a nexus point actually takes place, if it is going to be a big one, and I don't mean to do with changing the world necessarily, but just maybe in your own personal life or in something important that's going to happen around you, you can feel the ripple of that nexus point building. I always find that very strange things start occurring in my midst. Synchronicities start occurring, weird omens, you know, the sort of things in the past that would have been seen as signs and portents start to occur that in themselves are nothing, you know, like a bird flapping at the window or something like this. But you start putting them together and you think something's going on here in my life. And it's only afterwards, when you look back at that point, you start to realise that was an important nexus point. I mean, it could be like meeting your future wife or your future husband. You know, you meet them by deciding that day to go into a pub and having a drink. And there's somebody standing there, you start talking to them, you end up going out with them, you end up becoming their husband or their wife. What if you'd have made that decision on that day not to go out, not to go to the pub, or to gone to the other pub down the road? That's what I call an important nexus point. And those are very, very significant, I think, in our reality. And I think that the power around them is something which is of interest to higher intelligences.
Does that answer your question there?
It does. I just had another thought which I've been thinking about at the moment. There's a hell of a lot of change going on in the world at the moment, if not politically, but also geographically. And I was talking to somebody the other day about earthquakes, etc., rifts, and I was thinking about wherever there's a rift or a rip, you get a hell of a lot of energy occurring, and where energy occurs, you get growth and you get manifestations of creativity. So therefore, I was just wondering with my first point about nexus conditions and nexus happenings where we have choices, or maybe we just decide to do something, whether Andy believes there's a heightened sense of happenings at the moment with what's going on with the Earth as a thinking, perhaps, entity, but also, you know, politically, people making a lot of decisions about making rapid change at the moment. It just seems that, I think it seems like this year, there are opportunities for people to make distinct and, you know, historical changes going on. It just seems to be speeding up somewhat. I wonder if you've got any views on that.
Yeah, there certainly is a quite an acceleration of changes going on, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, as we've seen. But I don't know whether I would just look at those and see this as an obvious trend that's going on. I think if you ask me this same question in a year's time, I might be able to give you a better idea of whether this is meaningful or not. I mean, it's meaningful, obviously, for all the changes that are going on so far, but what type of repercussions it will have could take many years to take effect. So what I'm trying to say is this is like the beginning of something, and I think you have to start looking at, you know, is this, has this its own nexus points? Where did this all begin? I mean, one of the obvious nexus points is Tunisia, which is where the first, protests started in North Africa, and this resulted in the change of government there, and the current regime, you know, going out the window. Of course, obviously, this had a knock-on effect in Egypt, and then in the Yemen, in Bahrain, now in Libya, and other places as well. So it's beginning. I mean, I don't know where this is going. So my honest answer is I don't know where this is heading, but we must obviously start looking and using the dreaded date of 2012, because obviously that is next year. A lot of people that have predicting great Earth changes for 2012 because of the end of the Mayan calendar and other so-called eschatonic, points of change in the world. Terence McKenna predicted this a few years ago. That is all this a part of that? I don't know. This is why I say if you ask me the same questions in a year's time, we might get a better idea of whether this is heading towards some kind of point, a big point, of critical point, where it's all going to go wobbly. I don't know. I mean, I would think a lot of people who are into 2012 are looking towards the events now and saying, look, it's starting. So that's all I can say, I think, at the moment.
There we go. Well, did that help you out?
Absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much, Andy.
Okay.
Big respect from Turin. Good night.
Mr. N, are you actually in Turin?
I live there, yeah.
Oh my God! Right, international callers, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. So spread the word. Spread the word around where you are, then, and we'll
certainly do. Certainly will.
Now, somebody asked before you go. We'll just ask you one thing. Somebody said, "Where are these Skypers? Are they actually in the live stream chat channel?" So you can answer that one yourself. Are you in the live stream chat channel?
I'm just using Skype, and
you just texted us on Skype, yeah?
I texted you on Skype, saw this on Facebook, thought, there's the man. I just thought I'd ask him, which has been absolutely fabulous tonight. Thanks very much.
Okay, there you go. That's the answer for the people in channel. I think some people are kind of worried. Thanks very much for that.
Thanks, Nat.
Cheers. Some people are actually worried that we're fielding these calls. We're sort of like putting them out to certain people, and that really isn't happening. We're just getting people we don't know and some people we do know who are actually Skyping in, and everybody's welcome. Literally, anybody's welcome to ask us a question. If we don't answer it, then you have to scream a bit louder, because there's obviously a lot of questions going on in channel and people are answering their own questions. The people in channel are answering them or having an opinion on them. If you really wanted to be a question asked to Andy, say, I would like this question asked to Andy, and then we can differentiate it perhaps between just conversation which is going on in the channel, and it helps us to sort of help put the calls through. Now we've got Darthy, who is a regular caller, but let's see what he's got to say. Mr. Darthy, can you hear us?
I can indeed. Hello all.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Andrew. I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming on the show. Brilliant guest.
My pleasure.
I'd kind of like to ask you a bit about where you think the origins, the human origins, come from. I know you're very knowledgeable about Egypt and the pyramids.
Yeah.
Do you feel? Have you any idea on where you feel the modern man originated from?
Yeah. Well, I think that. I'm a great fan of Mr. Darwin. I do believe in human evolution. I do believe we probably developed from apes and went through various changes to become what we are today.
Sinner.
However, I do not discount the possibility that there may have been some kind of injection, if you like, into human consciousness from outside, be it extraterrestrial, cosmic, interdimensional or whatever, that we may well have been influenced in some manner by other intelligences. But I don't think that this needs to be seen as physical, not full aliens coming down here in nuts and bolts spacecraft. I see no full evidence of that at all. I'm not a ad hoc believer of the ancient astronauts idea, although I would never discount it, because I don't think anybody can ever discount it. And I think that the chances are that human life itself, not human life, but life in general, probably did arrive here aboard some kind of meteor that came here from elsewhere. Now, where are not some other parts of the solar system or even outside of it? I don't know. but I think it was probably brought here. It didn't actually evolve here across countless millions, billions of years. I think that we probably arrived here fully formed, i.e. as cell life, basically, having evolved within the plasma environments that exist within space itself. So, in other words, we are extraterrestrials, if you like.
So, I mean, I would just come on. I think I've got the answer there, really, but I was just kind of maybe coming. Have you heard of Adam's calendar and Michael Tallinger theory?
Well, in theory, I should be at Adam's calendar within a few weeks from now, actually, because I'm going to South Africa shortly. Michael Tellinger is a friend of mine. As I say, I shall be with him in a few weeks' time. He knows, I've talked to him about this, I do not accept the dates that he gives relating to the prehistoric monuments that he's discovered in South Africa. He's suggesting that they may be hundreds of thousands of years old. And that there may have been some kind of high civilization existing in South Africa that was behind the spread of modern Homo sapiens around the world. I'm not so sure personally. The dating evidence that he gives for Adam's calendar, I've checked very, very carefully with a technical engineer looking at the alignments, and I cannot agree with his findings, I'm afraid. He knows this, I've talked to him about it, I've discussed it, but on the other hand, what I do accept is that Adam's calendar and the many other thousands of monuments in South Africa need to be re-looked at, and that some of them may well be sacred monuments many thousands of years old. Exactly how old, I don't know.
It just comes back to that I keep hearing this story. I mean, it's a story, nevertheless. It seems to be repeated, and it seems to be, people can pull passages out of the Bible or from Sumerian texts. It's the gods, the fallen ones saw interest in the women of Earth. And then Homo sapiens came
Genesis
to be born.
6:4.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers.
Yeah. The problem is that the world has been seriously influenced by a man called Zecharia Sitchin.
Right.
Zecharia Sitchin took the stories of the angels, the watchers of the Book of Enoch, and Sumerian texts, reinterpreted them in his own way. And wrote in books that this suggested that the Watchers, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, the gods, the immortals, were aliens that came down hundreds of thousands of years ago and created humanity. And this was the story of Adam and Eve. I'm afraid to say that if you look at Sitchin's interpretation of these texts, they are essentially bollocks. They really are fantasy, and you will not find any academic or any scholar or anybody that's read these texts that sees the same things as Zecharia Sitchin saw. Sitchin was a follower of Eric von Daniken, and he sat down with these texts and felt that he could see the same type of ideas within them that von Daniken had seen at the Nazca lines or the tomb of Pakal in the Yucatan, and wrote a book called The 12th Planet. Zecharia Sitchin died last year. Now, anybody that tried to contradict his theories was threatened with legal action if they tried to write about it. A number of key researchers wanted to dispute what he did, and they were threatened with legal action. And he was so vehement that anybody that spoke out against him should not be anywhere near him on any bill. at conferences, or if he knew that certain people were there, then he wouldn't take part. He was actually quite a difficult man to deal with, and I mean, obviously, he wrote some interesting stuff. I read the 12th Planet. I enjoyed it, but I'm afraid to say that I cannot accept. I read those same texts at the same time, or just before I read the 12th Planet. I read those same texts for a book I did called From the Ashes of Angels that appeared in 1996. And I can tell you that his interpretation of them were fantasy.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for giving me your opinion, because all I seem to be getting is, obviously, I keep hearing it over and over again from different people, and maybe that's not the not the right.
Must be honest, I'd never heard anybody sort of take down Zachariah Sitchin until tonight.
Because
to be honest, that's fascinating.
He was a person who did not take criticism very well. I mean, there are a number of other authors that I know as friends that have criticised Zachariah Sitchin and come under his wrath and those of his supporters very heavily, to the point that they never published their material because they just knew that it may even involve legal action.
Right.
I think I may be a prime example of I'm a layman, and all I keep everything I look into, I keep getting the same story, and
I mean,
you've
the
shed
Watchers,
light on why that happens.
The Watchers, the Nephilim, the angels, the gods of Samaria, the Anunnaki, I show in From the Ashes of Angels were probably the memory of a priestly or shamanic elite that existed in the Near East, the area that we now know as Kurdistan, southeast Turkey, northern Iraq, the biblical Garden of Eden, if you like, that area, that they were the prime movers behind the so-called Neolithic revolution 10 to 12,000 years ago. They probably came in from somewhere else. I suggest that it was the area of the Nile in Africa, and they came over into the Near East probably around the end of a cataclysm, probably a comet event, and took over the show and changed the way people lived. They changed them from hunter-gatherers into more settled agricultural communities for the first time. They showed them metalworking. They introduced, organised religious ideas. They came across as an elite, and they remained separate from the other people that lived in this area. But very gradually, of course, the two became one. And these are the stories of the angels coming upon the mortal women, and taking them as their wives and producing these giant-sized babies, the Nephilim, and the Nephilim, running amok and having to be killed or whatever. This is the story in the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch can be shown to have been created in the very same geographic area that I'm talking about. So all of these things, that the Anunnaki, the Watchers, they did exist, but they were humans born and bred on Earth, I would say probably around 12,000 years ago. I would suggest that they were the remnants of a race of people that might just have been a different strain of humanity. And they probably coexisted with Homo sapiens in some form right the way through until about 2,000 to 3,000 BC, possibly slightly later, and then they may have died out. I don't think there was a large amount of them. We're probably dealing with a few hundred at the most, but these guys were very developed in mind. They were able to come in and take over the show, and I think that these people created the origins of civilization that we know it today. They were the origins of kingship, and a lot of these ideas were taken on from my book, From the Ashes of Angels, and used by Lawrence Gardner in his books, and I know that for the fact because he told me so. There's a lot of the idea of the lizard-headed people and the rest of it, which was also then used by David Icke all came from my book, I'm afraid. But I didn't say I didn't say anything about them being aliens or anything like that. To me, this was an abstract memory of this elite, which was said to have faces like vipers, which I interpret as very long faces, you know, like some East Asian peoples today. They were going into an environment probably where the people looked a lot differently, possibly with much more rounded faces. They were said to be quite tall. They said to have had white hair. Albino features were seemingly prevalent as well. So they looked different. Maybe. And I think that they were seen as these immortals. They may have had a different lifestyle. They may have even had a longer lifespan. And that's what's remembered in these ancient texts, not spacemen coming down.
There you go. Does that help answer that one?
It does indeed. Yeah, I would just like to say thank you very much. I'm privileged to talk to you, Andrew.
Thank you.
And although you're not a professor, maybe you should be.
In another life, maybe.
Thank you very much.
May get recognised one day.
A separate Nexus point, maybe. I did become a professor.
Well, you know, maybe you'll get one of these real professorship honorary things that gets given to people, but the real type, not the ones that you pay for yourself.
I think it's very unlikely.
Okay, well, thanks, Dorothy, for calling in. And right, we've got a question from somebody. I'll ask you a question. Would you like an energy drink or a cup of coffee, by the way, because you've been here for a bit now?
Tea.
Cup of tea? How many sugars?
Just milk, please.
Just milk.
Yeah.
There you go. This is the type of show we are. We do this on air. So the question was by somebody called Stuck in a Web, and it says, what does Andrew make of these few cases, in brackets, like the Stonehenge Julia set formation from 7/7 of 96, where multiple eyewitnesses saw the formation being created in daylight in strange fog? I think I've kind of talked about this one on the show, but maybe this is a new listener. But what's your take on that?
Okay, well, look. We're talking about the Julia set that appeared at Stonehenge. What year was it? 96, was it?
Yeah, 7/7 of 96. Okay.
Yeah. Now, the original story was that a pilot flew over the area, saw nothing, came back 45 minutes later, and there it was on the ground, implying that it had appeared during the daylight in no time at all. And thus, this was perfect evidence of it being created by some kind of supernatural means. Firstly, with this, I think that you have to say, well, is the pilot absolutely sure? I mean, there have been various other cases since where people have claimed to have gone past fields and not seen anything, come back past there a little later, and there it was. Or somebody else went past there at a little later point and found something. Human perception is a very odd thing. Sometimes it can actually block out the most obvious, the most obvious thing in front of your eyes. So I think just because a pilot happens to say that doesn't mean that that's the case. Also, you'll see it on CircleMakers sites that they are sure that formation was there the night before because they know precisely who made it. And I'm afraid to say that Occam's razor here says that they're probably correct, because if we believe that 99.9% of crop formations are human, then the likelihood is, I'm afraid, that there is a logical explanation for this one as well. However, what you are talking about, I'm pretty certain, is the fact that in more recent years, some people have come forward and said, I was actually at Stonehenge at the time and I saw these people looking in the field and I went over there and they said this formation had just appeared, or that there was some mist appearing, and that they saw the formation appear there and then. I am a little sceptical of those type of accounts, simply because why have they only just come forward when this event occurred in 1996? And the incident that I'm just referring to here is something that only came to light in the last 2 years. And it's now obviously convenient that a particular formation that was said to have appeared in daylight, in broad daylight, so quickly that this should be the one that everybody saw appearing at the time. So I'm afraid to say that I think that you would be foolish to believe these stories without actually having been there and seen it for yourself. This is not to say that people have not seen not formations but crop circles appear, because there does seem to be some genuine cases where individuals have been out in filmed, some of them farmers, and they've seen swirling masses, things going on, and yeah, sure, there have been circles appearing, but these are simple circles, not formations. I could be completely wrong, of course. Everybody has their own opinion, but I just want you to look at the fact that crop formations almost certainly are made by humans, and you know, I mean, last year, for instance, you know, right up until mid-July, I was aware of who had made every single formation but 2. And, you know, this is something which almost certainly has been going on all the way along. And there are a number of different teams, and it is very difficult to keep up with who is doing what. And even if all the known teams suddenly say, look, lads, let's all stop, there would still be more appearing, because they can't keep control of everybody that makes these things. So I'd just be very, very wary of these so-called witness testimonies, because you don't know whether they're true or not, I'm afraid.
I was going to say, with a statement like that, you knew nearly every circle appeared last year. There's only one thing we can do. He seems to be quite excited by what you just said. So, yes, there's one more comment by Stuck in a Web. Says, what about the A303? There were many cars parked on the A303 watching. I mean, you know, there are people that will not see these things. And then once they've suddenly spotted them, then everybody goes, what's that? Oh, and then everyone sees it, and then it becomes part of the common experience. But, you know,
I mean, well, sorry, just repeat that. There were a load of cars on the A303
There were many
watching.
cars parked on the A303 watching that field area. But
and I mean, somebody can give us a reference of that from July 1996.
I mean,
I don't believe that evidence is there.
I think there's a lot of wishful thinking going on with this one, because I've discussed it on YouTube, and I mean, my take on it was that being a pilot, somebody who is fixated by an object such as Stonehenge or the flying, they're doing a lot more of that than they are looking into a field.
Yeah.
You've got Stonehenge is very visible, and crops sometimes from certain directions, certain light angles, you don't see them.
Yeah.
And when you fly the other way, then you do see them. It's like a polarized light effect, whereby things can become invisible in one direction with the lay of the light, basically.
Absolutely.
So
you know, I mean,
I think people want this one to be true, you know, because it would be amazing. But the point is, you need to go with the ones where the circle makers haven't claimed them.
Yeah. But the
and
thing
this one is one that we know is made by circle makers.
That was a single Julia set. There was a triple Julia set later on in that same season, beneath Windmill Hill. Thank you very much. Which to me is arguably my favourite image, other than Crookie Soley. I find incredible, but there, you know, I'm quite happy to accept that that was made by human hands. I still think that it's an incredible symbol, and it was used, went on to be used as the main symbol in a sci-fi series called Threshold, which was a brilliant TV series, where they saw it in terms of the symbol for a triple DNA, you know, that we're evolving from a double to a triple DNA. I love that idea. I think that's incredible, and who knows, that might be a symbol for this transformation. But as I said, I'm quite happy to accept that was human made. But as I said, these are my opinions. In my world vision, this is my reality. Other people will find it difficult to accept what I say. Fine, no problems at all. But please look at the evidence here. Just assess everything as you go along, and just accept the possibility that crop circles crop formations could well be human-made.
Yes. And talking about Threshold, which is a very good series, I don't know if many people saw it, but if you're interested in crop circles, you should see this series, Threshold. And unfortunately, I think it was cancelled. You know, it was cancelled on the first season, which is like, bastards.
And midway
you
during
bastards.
the series.
They didn't even finish it, yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of unanswered questions from a sci-fi series, and I like my sci-fi series, but they were very heavily into this this design pattern being integral to the show.
Yeah.
So I bet whoever made that crop circle is just chuffed to bits, because you know, when you see something that you've actually done like that getting used in Hollywood terms, and people going like, yeah, this means something, look, we're gonna make a whole TV series around the design you've done in a field. Wow. Yeah, okay. and the people who do these things, they're not even known. Then they're really not even known. You know, they're not famous, they're not known on this program, they haven't been on this show, and it's just fascinating that something like that can be out there, you know, in the public domain. So yeah, and cause so much of a stir. So did you say we got another question here? Jimone, who is a regular, has said, can you ask which two formations does Andrew which two formations Andrew does not know the creators to?
Well, there's loads that I don't actually know the creators of, but the ones I genuinely don't know, I don't know who did that Stonehenge one, the Julia set, which by virtue of that almost certainly means the triple Julia as well, it was almost certainly the same people that did the same. They obviously were evolving, advancing. And I still don't know to this day who did the Alton Barnes formation from 1990.
Led
Zeppelin. All the other ones, yeah.
The Led Zeppelin, yeah, that's still
very you know, maybe the information's out there, but it certainly wasn't anybody that I was talking to around that time. And I mean, I knew most of the obvious circle makers of that period, and although I never actually met Doug and Dave, by the way, I did go along to one of their meetings and listen to them. But those that made the formations at that time, and they, you know, we're talking about, you know, sort of lesser ones in this area, they referred to this group as the A-Team. That's what they referred to them. And who exactly the A-Team was to this day, I don't actually know.
Yeah, there's a lot of question. Somebody's just put in the word John Michel, ?
Well, John Michel is somebody who believed that crop formations were genuine.
Yes.
And he carried this right to the point, you know, his death last year. And, you know, that was his conviction, his belief, and respect to him for that. I don't agree with that, and obviously most other people who were actually his friends, you know, when they tried to talk to him about that, he would have none of it. As far as he was concerned, nope, you know, a number of the crop formations are genuine, and that was that. But that was his opinion. I mean, everybody's got their opinion. But what I would say is that if you want to read one book on crop circles, read the Crooked Soley book. It's actually got that in the title, so you'll find it easily by John Michel. It's superb. It's absolutely superb, and will make you think again about the nature of crop circles, even if you do accept that they're made by human hands, because whoever, whatever created that formation is an absolute genius. And what is the word genius? It comes from genie, you know, which means from genius loci, from spirit, from the spirit world. So whether it was channeled through a human individual or came directly, you know, it is genius.
Well, I did speak very briefly with John Michel once, because a very good friend of his, Jürgen Kronig, German newspaper writer, writes for Die Zeit newspaper. He'd also written some books on crop circles which were released in Germany, and being a very good friend of John Michel, and also believing wholeheartedly, well, not believing, he knew that people were making crop circles, he introduced me. He said, you've got to meet Matthew, because Matthew's quite approachable. You know, he's not like a lot of the circle makers who kind of a bit sort of cagey. Matthew's okay. Have a chat with him, and I spoke to him, and he was not at all pleased, because he kind of felt that it had been kind of sprung on him, because I was in the barge, John Michelle was in the barge, and he said, "Hey, meet Matthew. He's okay." You know, and he just nope. And I said, well, you know, we are, and we've had paranormal experience. Nope. He didn't want to listen, didn't want to talk. Total shutdown, which is a shame, because I would have loved to have shared my experiences with somebody who had such a passionate belief in the paranormality of crop circles. But, you know, sometimes never the twain shall meet, as they say. And that's a terrible shame. Yeah,
I mean, it is a shame, particularly from the point of view of John Michelle has left behind an incredible legacy of knowledge, wisdom, and literature, which will almost certainly be heralded as visionary for hundreds of years. I think his name will go on forever, basically. But in a way, I suppose it's interesting that he should believe that that the crop circles, you know, were supernatural. I mean, you know, I think that in itself will raise issues in the future, which I think are important. But, you know, people have got to start asking themselves, why did John Michelle believe that?
Yes. Well, you know, these people like John Martineau, John Michelle. I've seen some absolutely fantastic talks by John Martineau. Not really seen John Michelle talks, but John Martineau explaining the very unusual coincidences between the distances of the planets and the sizes of the planets, and how these things all seem to sort of form into a you'd say like a sort of musical scale, or like a multiplication scale, so that things are, you know, things aren't as random as people think. That there is a sort of a symphony in the universe, a symphony of music going on, and that things fall into shapes. And I think that it's all fascinating. That stuff is all fascinating, and why circle makers would pick up on these things subconsciously or unconsciously is a big mystery. I mean, okay, we all know circle makers can pick up a book. You know, we can pick up a book on maths, you know, and say, oh, fractals, yes, let's do a fractal out in the field, and everyone will get wowed by it. But what won't necessarily have been something that the circle makers planned on might be the actual shape of the fractal might mean something, you know, because a fractal could be any type of thing, but how you actually put it out in the field is obviously going to be something you design, and the actual sizes of the shapes of the fractal might mean something quite important. So, you know, circle makers pick up books just like everybody else, but the detail, it's in the detail. If there is something there in the crop circles, and these people like John Michelle, maybe even Michael Glickman, although I'm a bit skeptical about him because of his you know, being a bit wide on his professor title and all that. But I mean, maybe these people have got the knack of pulling out the mathematical magic from crop circles, but those are man-made crop circles. The reason they can't get on with us is because they can't believe that there's any way, shape or form that anybody could ever connect with this and do this stuff, because only people of their stature and intelligence could kind of know these things or work these things out. And I would agree. I'm not a mathematician. You know, hats off to those people that can do maths. I'm shit at maths, you know, but maybe it's like I always go back to these things like Einstein, you know, having dreams. That actually gave him some of his inspiration for his theories. And I think, is it Clive Tombaugh, the guy who discovered Pluto, something like that? I think he had strange dreams about something scientific, and maybe about, you know, this
benzene molecule as well.
Yeah,
the guy that discovered that. Plus Crick, Francis Crick, the discoverer of the DNA double helix spiral. The whole thing came to him whilst he was high on LSD.
Wow, yeah. And
that's something that I picked up on and used in my book, The Cygnus Mystery, which talks all about, you know, inspiration coming from altered states of consciousness, including drug-related altered states. And so did Graham Hancock in his book Supernatural. In fact, we both went along really similar lines with that. That idea, you know, of inspiration coming in this way. But it happens a lot more than what you think. A hell of a lot more.
Yes. Well, we've put up a link in channel for the book, the Crooked Soley book.
Yeah.
And you can get.
I would recommend that.
Yeah.
To anybody out there. I mean, you know, it's a marvel to read, and because it's got John Michel's hand on it as well, it reads beautifully. Who's the other author with it? Whose name I
Alan Brown, is it?
Alan Brown. There you go.
Yeah.
So it's Alan Brown and John Michel. What's it called? Just Crooked Soley, a crop circle.
We've got it back
Revelation,
there.
is that
a crop
right?
circle revelation.
Right,
It is. Yes.
okay.
Yeah. There we go.
So that's your recommended book for the night.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we might as well round it off at 12 o'clock, the witching hour, which will be for Mr. Collins. This is we can't finish it at 10 to 12, can we? We've got to finish it bang on 12. It's Mr. Collins. So, but we haven't got long of the show left. So if you have got any questions which are very pressing, then please do let us know. But we've got Dion is asking a question. I've had one pointed out above as well, but Dion he's put a question in capital letters, which is obviously going to get my attention. We'll have to start using this as a format. If you put a question in capital letters, I can work out which ones you want me to ask then. If crop circles are subconsciously designed, then what is the message? Why is it so?
That's a great one, and I think that almost should be the theme of any future research. You were asking earlier on. We'll get on to what should the future research be in this subject, and I think that's it. You know, that there is a message, and we need to start interpreting it. People are already doing it, of course they are. I mean, you've only got to look at the crop circle forums, and people are coming up with ideas all the time about, you know, the interpretations of different formations. Go with it. I think that, you know, you have to look at each different design as it comes along. Some of them are just not going to relate to you at all. You're not going to feel that they have any relevance, and they're just a nice, pretty pattern. Others you'll see and you'll look at, and it will quite literally do something to your head. That's the way I felt when I saw Crooked Soley for the first time. That's the way I felt when I saw the triple Julia set at Windmill Hill for the first time. Those things resonate with me. I can look at them, I can use them as mandalas to get information out of them. I can feel that something important is happening when I look at them, and I've not done this yet, but one day I will go to the Crooked Soley site because I feel that if I go there, something will happen. Now that's my personal belief. Because it's important, and important to me, I think there's something about that place where it was created, and you know the fact that it did happen, that you could almost say, well, that marks it out as a place in time and space that has significance and will always have significance here. And if you look in the local history, the local folklore, the more you look, the more you will find out. And that's basically what this book is about, the Crooked Soley book. You know, you will see it. The more they looked into the folklore of the area and whatever, the more stuff came out. And the more you start to realise that whoever or whatever created it had no knowledge of this. They couldn't possibly have had any knowledge of this.
Do you know what a strange thing is? I haven't talked about this a lot, but I can guarantee you, you know, we talk in teams about this as being the way we work. But when we pick a point in a field, sometimes, you know, you'll go to survey an area beforehand and you look down, maybe, you know, drive past in the car and you go, yeah, that looks like a nice field. You may walk up on a hill and make sure, you know, have a good look, maybe with binoculars, just to make sure it hasn't got any wind damage. I mean, I'm lucky because I've got an aircraft. I can actually fly over and make sure the things aren't wind damaged. Some people have been picking fields like that. But when you actually get out there at night, it's dark. You can't be sure where you were in the daytime to where you are at the night time. So where you planned to put that formation, you thought you were going to put it in that spot in the field, and then at night you can't work out how to get to that point in the field. Some people count the number of tram lines from the edge, and they say, right, you know, count up 10 tram lines, you know you're going to be in the right place. But a lot of the time, and I'm guilty of this, you know, you just think, well, I know where I want that to be. It's on the crown of the hill. So you think you can get to that later on. And you get into the field and then you say, well, I'm not quite sure where it is, but I know it's near the crown of the hill. So you walk till it feels right. and then you turn into the tram line, and you keep walking until it feels right. And people stop at where it feels right. And the strange thing is, you're almost, in a sense, I think, dowsing the point where you're walking to the point where you know it feels right. Strangely enough, unbeknownst to us, that happens to be the place where another crop circle was put in exactly the same spot the year before, and happens to be on top of an ancient burial mound or a feature that can be seen from the air, which you're not aware of. That there's a significance to that specific point that you didn't know, but by walking out there in the complete darkness, you felt it. That's where it's got to go, and that happens a lot. Circle makers are always really feeling out where's the right point in the dark.
Well, it's good to hear this sort of information coming out. I mean, these are the sort of stories which the circle makers should be sharing with the general public. I've heard some incredible stories from them about the experiences that they've had, whilst they're making them in particular, or even directly afterwards, actual visions, seemingly time warps, ghostly apparitions, all these things, all of which have occurred in connection with the making of formations. I can't tell half these stories at this point in time. I would love to share them with the world. I haven't got permission to do so, but it is a fascinating subject. Somebody could even write a book on this subject alone. But in all honesty, they probably wouldn't do it at the moment for the simple reason that there wouldn't be the readership for it.
Well,
that's
this
the sad
is true.
fact
Yeah.
at the moment.
Circle makers are not well liked. Who would want to read a book by a circle maker?
Yeah. But
or containing circle
I'm
makers.
happy to see that people that are actually talking about this subject in public lectures are certainly getting fair hearings now. Nick Redfern wrote in Fortean Times just in the last couple of issues that he was at a big conference in America and talked about the importance of crop formations, but also stated quite clearly that they were man-made, and the whole thing went down very well. So things are changing. I mean, I know, as I said earlier on, that in the past that some key circle researchers have got up on stage and actually virtually killed their career.
Yes.
I mean, literally.
I think we know who you're talking about.
A
Yes.
few, yeah.
Yes, we know who you're talking about. But the times are a-changing, and this is what CirclemakersTV is all about. It's about bringing both sides together and saying, look, there are areas that you wouldn't want you wouldn't want to give us your money because you hate us so much, but this doesn't cost any money. This is free. The information is free. The internet is free. And if you can't find the information on the internet, then it's probably not out there. But one does need to do one's own research. You shouldn't believe everything you read in books, and you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet. You have to go and check to make sure for yourself, because who are these people who write these books, and who are these circle makers? But if you do go out there and you do the research, I think you'll find the answers. You'll probably come to the same conclusions that I did, and I think Mr. Collins did, and I'm really glad that we've had you on the show tonight, because it's been fascinating, and we're only touching the tip of the iceberg for your knowledge, and I knew it was going to be a good one. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
I know that people in channel have been saying fantastic show, really enjoyed it. So, you've gone down the storm, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching this afterwards on the repeat thing. We've got to mention again though that what you're doing with your psychic questing is a very interesting thing, because it's a chance to actually try out some of what you write about in your books. And you're going to be there as well, so even better. Because,
I mean, basically, I should be doing most of the weekend. There are guest speakers as well, but I think the importance about psychic questing is that if I hadn't had a psychic questing attitude, I would not have discovered a whole new cave system beneath the pyramids at Giza. That attitude of following intuition, following psychic leads, seeing where it leads, not just doing that, but checking it out historically, going out into the field, years of research gets results. That is a prime example of psychic questing working. That's how important it is.
Yes.
You can find something that every Egyptologist over the last 200 years has missed.
Yes. That's absolutely right. Yeah, get out there and use your energies to find things.
Yeah.
And I seem to have an uncanny ability to sort of work out military bases that have bunkers in them.
Fair enough.
I'm gravitated towards them. I seem to know that there's something going on there. And when I actually ask around, they go, "Oh yeah, there's a really big bunker there." And it's like, and I think that's been part of my history over the years. But
that's intuition.
That's intuition.
Yeah.
It's kind of knowing this. Oh,
Yeah.
look at that place. That feels like I must be going there. And you go there, you find something, bang. It all kicks off. You should go on your intuitions. But that's happening the 17th of 18th of September, and it'll be taking place around the Avebury area.
It's in Avebury Village Hall,
right,
opposite St James's Church. Everything you need to know, plus lots of what we've been talking about tonight, is on andrewcollins.com.
And I've just put the title.
And also, if you, we're on Facebook and Twitter, so as soon as you go on andrewcollins.com, click through to Facebook and say hi.
Yes. So if this stuff resonates with you, do they need to get tickets in advance? It'd probably be advisable,
you will need
wouldn't
advance registration for the event, yeah.
It's probably not a good idea to turn up on the day. You might find that it might be booked out.
They might be might be disappointed.
Yes. So I would get in for that now, because I know these things are very popular. So, andrewcollins.com is the website. You can order books and stuff from there. I'm sure you can find out how to order them on that site. And Andy certainly has a lot of books that you can go and look at. So thanks very much for coming in. We're 2 minutes past the witching hour, so he hasn't turned into a pumpkin. Damn it.
I've got to get home yet.
Yeah, right, okay. I was keeping him here for just that purpose, and he's still here.
Maybe the car's turned into a pumpkin.
Maybe your pumpkinness is based on a different time system in somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So we'll have to keep. Oh, damn it! He's probably on Egypt time, aren't you?
I might be.
You're on pumpkin Egypt time. Damn it. Okay, so well, thanks very much everybody for tuning in, and we'll have a secret guest for you next week. We don't know who it's going to be yet, and. We'll maybe hint a few times, but it could well be a secret one. So it might be a circle maker, it could be somebody else, but at this moment we don't know. So thanks very much everyone, and we'll catch you again soon. So take care, bye. This is where I have to find the button that says end titles. Where it is? There it is, end titles. Bye.
Thank you.